Is this, we get a new employee, this is what happens?
Just turn the microphone off before you say that.
Now live from Village Hall.
Now we're good? Start over. To call this meeting to order, March 26th of the Board of Trustees. Could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Trustee Davis Ford. Here. Trustee Goldberg.
Here.
Trustee Gould. Here. Trustee Levinson.
Here.
Trustee Rosner.
Here.
President Torpy.
Here.
Thank you. And we expect Trustee Bauer shortly after roll call. Adequate notice of this meeting had been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall, on our village website, and has been filed in the office of the village clerk. Official action may be taken at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, before we get started tonight, there are a couple of announcements. Just reminding people again that you can get your 2012 Recreation and Cultural Affairs ID badges down at the Baird, 5 Mead Street. And the fee up until May 15th is $30 per person, after which it is increased to $35 per person. Annual spring cleanup. Public Works is beginning collection of leaf lawn and garden rakings on April 2nd, and will do so through May 14th. You can bring your leaves and yard waste between the sidewalk and the street. Try not to put it actually in the street, please. And if you can bundle up the small branches and twigs, that would be great as well. The Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, started this past weekend, Saturday, March 24th, up at Seton Hall. It's going to go on for another 3 weekends. If you're interested in taking the class, there will be makeup classes, so if you didn't make this Saturday, you can still do this round. And you can go to southorange.org/CERT to learn a little bit more. And as always, we thank Seton Hall, who's been a really great partner in doing the training with us up there. Village Hall offices will be closed on Friday, April 6th for Good Friday. And also, we're looking for volunteers to help out with the newly created Special or Business Improvement District. If you're a resident, a business owner, or a property owner, and you're interested in getting involved or more involved with the downtown, please give us drop us an email, or you can fill out the volunteer form on the website. Go to southorange.org and go to the left-hand side and click the volunteering link. And we'll have a little bit more information about the improvement district and what it means up on our website hopefully by mid this week.
Through you, Mr. President, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the sadness that we must all feel about the loss of Coach Wright's husband, Lonnie Wright. And if you read the article on the Patch about him, he was truly a servant who believed in public service and left a legacy behind that South Orange residents should be proud of.
Okay.
The wake is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Do you know exact location in
I don't have the details. Okay.
Sorry. We have a couple presentations this evening.
It's Thursday.
The first is a consulting report done on the South Orange Performing Arts Center. Yep, come on up. Yep, you can just take the podium there.
Good to go?
Yeah, thank you for coming in to do this presentation. This was a consulting report that the village contracted for with Harak Consulting, and basically to do an analysis of SOPAC, its financial state, and some other factors. So it's going to speak a little bit about that tonight.
Okay, thank you for having me. I just want to say before I begin that I was given this assignment with the charge that there would be no preconceived notions. I wasn't told whether I should be pro or against or have any opinion regarding SOPAC, just to conduct my investigation and give my findings, and that's what I'd like to do today. I'm going to summarize my report, and then if anybody has any questions at the end, I would certainly be happy to answer them. First of all, my overall feeling is that SOPAC has a tremendous positive effect on the township.
I'm sorry, before we continue, maybe if you could just quickly introduce a little bit about yourself and your company, and the kind of things you do, just to give a little background.
Certainly. My name is Len Herrick. I am the president and owner of Herrick Consulting. I am a strategic business consulting firm. I have a PhD in business administration, and I've been guiding small and medium-sized businesses both in a move forward or in troubled financial waters.
Just make sure you speak into this.
Troubled financial waters pretty much for the past 25 years. My expertise is determining the bottom line, the best way to make something profitable, and determining problems within a business and making the business more efficient. And the charge with SOPAC was to take a look at it as a business and try to decide what the pluses were, what the minuses were, and ways in which we may be able to improve the overall business structure and also the relationship between SOPAC and the township.
Thank you.
There's a PowerPoint with this presentation.
No, there won't be a PowerPoint. We'll be putting some information, and the report should be available on our website afterwards.
So the high points on the positive overview of SOPAC are clearly that it certainly brings people to the township and spins off revenue into the downtown businesses, something I'll go into a little further in a moment. SOPAC certainly partners with the village and provides programming for the residents. Certainly SOPAC provides a cultural and economic benefit to the community, and it certainly brings a certain cachet to the town, which results in my opinion, increased real estate values and a draw of spenders to the town. I studied a bunch of other competitive organizations, large and small, as large as the Metropolitan Opera and as small as the Paper Mill Playhouse and others in between, like the New York Philharmonic and JPAC. And in order to try to find out, looking at the financials of SOPAC, how did they measure up in relation to other such organizations? My conclusion is that SOPAC performed quite well financially compared to other similar organizations, both large and small. And in fact, they actually produce more revenue percentage-wise from ticket sales than most of their larger competitors. So if you're comparing apples and apples, SOPAC is as good or better than any organization I was able to study, from the Metropolitan Opera size all the way on down. Secondly, I had the opportunity and the pleasure to interview each and every one of the SOPAC employees. It's my practice when I evaluate a business to speak to everyone from the bottom up, because everybody has something to bring to the table. And typically, when I interview employees, I find varying levels of performance, varying levels of enthusiasm and interest. And I was actually quite surprised to find and to report to you that there wasn't a single employee at SOPAC that, in my opinion, wasn't working at 100% capacity and wasn't incredibly dedicated and willing to do whatever it took to get the job done, even with what I consider limited compensation. And having looked at a lot of businesses and interviewing a lot of employees, to find across the board that level of commitment was really quite something. However, on the negative side of things, I was looking initially to see how the model of SOPAC worked in the town, and through the course of my investigation, I had an opportunity to read some press and talk to some people and just get a sense of, how people felt about SOPAC. And, some of the negative feedback that I received was that SOPAC was underperforming financially, there was monies that weren't coming back to the township that were supposed to, things of that nature. Well, in my opinion, from a business perspective, that's absolutely not true. The fact of the matter is that, and this certainly goes back long before my time, but when this SOPAC business relationship with the township was originally crafted, there was an assumption that they were going to take on an approximately $15 million debt and they were going to, with a 435-seat theater and a small conference space, service that debt and also pay their bills. Well, that could never have been possible. No matter how hard an organization that small worked and how many seats they filled, that's a debt that could not be serviced. And I wasn't able to find any other organization that had any kind of a debt like that hanging around its neck. So in my opinion, if there was an assumption that that debt would be serviced and a disappointment on the part of the township, that disappointment should have been expected because there's no way that debt could have been serviced. That said, there are also some things about SOPAC that a lot of people don't recognize, I would think, especially from some of the press I read. Meaning the money that comes from SOPAC to the township is not the real big value of the institution, aside from what it brings to a community. There are several studies that determine approximately how much an individual that goes to a performing arts center spends in the town, separate and apart from the tickets. And if you take a look at the number of people that attend SOPAC and do the calculation based on national averages, which are weighted higher, by the way, in the Northeast, SOPAC brings approximately $1 million into the surrounding business community as an offshoot of people who come to SOPAC and then spend money in the town. And that is only the initial coming to a performance, buying dinner, having a drink afterwards. That doesn't take into account what they call the ripple effect, which is people who come to town, realize it's a nice place, and come back again. Now, I certainly can't quantify that, although their estimates say anywhere from 10 to 20% is an expectation, which would be another 200,000. But certainly $1 million is arguably spent in surrounding businesses as a result just of SOPAC. As most of you know, SOPAC also houses Clearview Cinema. They bring in approximately 140,000 people a year into the town, and based on the national average of about $7 a person, that brings probably another $900,000 into the community spent outside of the institution. So in my opinion, in addition to whatever revenue is derived from SOPAC, there is approximately $2 million extra that comes into town initially, and if the ripple effect is 20%, probably another $400,000 on top of that. And these are not made up artificial, I hope, numbers. This is pretty much a recognized number nationwide, and I think it's important to realize that people don't just come here, go into the theater, and go back home. They spend money in town, and if they like the town, they come back. SOPAC brought last year, into the last calendar year, 38,200 people, and the cinema brought in 140,000. Those are individual people paying for individual tickets. That's a tremendous amount of people spending money in a community, and I think that's a huge plus of SOPAC. In addition, SOPAC services school children. 3,944 school children attended SOPAC education performances in the last year, and their Kids and Family series, 2,881 people attended. Again, a huge service to the community, and I don't think anybody can argue that having a cultural center is a bad thing. SOPAC also, I learned, partners with the village in a variety of ventures. We have the concerts in the park, the Giants of Jazz, Jazz in the Loft, the hosting of the village meetings beginning in the fall of 2012, the internship program with Seton Hall University, the summer camp with the South Mountain YMCA, and programs and tickets made available to area schools at very decreased prices so that basically anybody can attend, and professional performance and meeting space for the local performing arts groups are also provided by SOPAC. One of the real challenges here was to take a look, and I think a lot of people are interested in financial performance. How does SOPAC stack up against other like institutions? Because to compare it against anything other than similar institutions would be unfair. Well, based on the institutions I looked at, they typically earn about 40% of their expenses from ticket revenue. SOPAC earns about 50%. So compared to each and every organization I was able to find that is similar in the area, large and small, SOPAC outperforms them. As far as the budget, the division of what goes to where, it's comparable to any of the other art centers. It's being divided up similarly. As far as the staff is concerned, it's my opinion that SOPAC does more with less than any business or institution I've ever studied. I mean, the ability of some of their staff to cobble things together and produce workable electronic devices and infrastructure, you only get that from really incredibly dedicated people, and I can tell you that other institutions are spending a lot more. As far as the debt is concerned, SOPAC carries an inordinate amount of debt compared to any other organization I've ever seen of its kind because of the real estate, which, as I said earlier, I don't think makes sense. And as far as the revenue sources, what percentage of dollars comes in from donations, what percentage comes in from tickets, what percentage comes in from the state, the township, they are pretty much the same as everybody else. I mean, there's really no difference. So to say that they were underperforming in any way would be inaccurate, and in fact overperforming, in certainly in the case of personnel and in the percentage of money that they raise from ticket sales, with an incredibly limited, I will say, marketing budget, and with an enormous amount of competition. Because you got a 435-seat theater compared to all these other much larger facilities, and the fact that they're holding their own in that environment, I think, speaks to the leadership, my opinion. As far as the overall situation, I'll summarize it like this. First of all, there is not a feasible model for SOPAC currently. There is a call for a $15 million debt service, which will never happen. And there is an underfunding of the institution, even if you do a very simple budget and accept the fact that they're doing a lot with a little. So the original plan needs to be revisited, in my view. The original plan, for instance, called for a pass-through of Clearview rent. So I know there's been some pushback that why isn't the rent being collected and passed on to the township? Well, it can't be, because the institution is underfunded, and therefore it needs to keep that money to balance its budget. You can't expect them to give back money when they're not getting the money they expected and still balance their budget. And considering the fact that everybody is working at 100%, I don't really see how that money could pass through. And therefore, again, I don't think that should be expected. My investigation indicates that SOPAC requires about $576,000 a year in township support. Now, that can either be a check for $576,000 and then they can pass the Clearview revenue back through, or it can be $576 less the approximately $181,000. But no matter how you slice it, in order to balance the budget, you need $576,000 in my view. And looking at last year, that leaves them about $191,000 short. So my summary is this. Certainly, when you compare SOPAC to other similar institutions, it performs as well or better. Secondly, if you take a look, as I do with most businesses, at the use of assets and resources, I think they're doing as much as anybody possibly could with what they have. I think there are some expectations that were wrong, and in order to judge somebody as underperforming with unreasonable expectations is just not fair. And I think that there's two things that they need, three things really. Number one, I think the township, my recommendation, should take back the building and own it as an asset, because there's no way this place could ever pay that debt service. Number two, I think that some way we have to realize that it's a $575,000 a year expense and figure out how that amount of money is going to flow there. And third, I think that SOPAC is really in need of a comprehensive business plan for growth. There are a tremendous amount of things that are being instituted, new programs, new fundraising initiatives, but the fact of the matter is if you don't have the money to balance the budget, then you can come up with planning all day long, and they've come up with some really good stuff, but you got to pay the bills, you got to keep the lights on. And even though some of their staff people are taping things together and keeping things going with yeoman-like efforts, I think the right budget, which I think is about 575 grand, should be put in place. I think everybody should collaborate on a strategic plan that makes sense with reality. And I think overall, I don't think anybody could question the fact that having a performing arts center of this caliber is a benefit to any town. It increases real estate values, it draws people to the town, it keeps people in the town, and it's certainly good for youth. And those are my findings. I thank you for the opportunity, and if anybody has any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
I want to thank you for a comprehensive presentation for me, and you presented it in very clear, simple, easy to understand terms that anyone viewing or watching could get a better understanding of the overall challenges, things that work and don't work. And this is the best comprehensive presentation for me that I've received. One question. You pointed out the financial challenges, you pointed out the staffing, and all those other things that work, but you said the initial premise was something that could never work. So what would have been the approach to establish a performing center in here that was reasonable and that would work, as opposed to how this entity came into being?
Okay, well, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that very much. As far as I'm concerned, the one fatal flaw that could easily be corrected is to give the debt service of a huge building to a small institution. I think the biggest positive correction that could be made is for the SOPAC building, which is certainly an asset, to be kept by the township and to figure out some kind of very reasonable rent, shall we say, that the facility would pay commensurate with what the budget allows. That enormous shift would really bring things back to reality. I think that's the biggest problem. The second is to sit down together with the township and accept the fact that it costs about $575,000 a year in addition to what everybody can bring in to run this institution. Have a reasonable expectation, accept the fact that we're either going to pay that much money or pay it less, 180, and let them keep the Clearview revenue. Those are the two things that change. The biggest one, of course, being the building. The building has got to go. I mean, unless we build 40 more stories, it's just not going to happen. So that's the first one and the biggest one. And the second one is a budget balancing issue, which I think we're all familiar with, but I think I've come to a number that is accurate.
Could you speak maybe very quickly, just for the benefit of the public, when you talk about the debt service to the building, that it's just not some number that's on a balance sheet, that there's actually some consequences of having debt on a building, is that correct? For example, a nonprofit that's applying for grants, is something like the organizations or the building's debt service taken into account?
No, that's a very good point. Anybody who is looking at an organization like this is going to look at the financial statements, and they're going to see this incredible red ink because there's a huge debt not commensurate with other organizations. And if they're weighing one institution against another and looking at the balance sheet, our balance sheet is never going to measure up.
Could you elaborate on this whole idea of taking the building back? It's something we've obviously discussed it at some point, but I still don't understand how that math works. I mean, you're already saying we need to increase the subsidy to $576K. Argument's sake, we take the building back, we then now inherit the maintenance obligation of that building, and you're saying that SOPAC would then pay rent. I mean, what is the offset for what they're paying now for maintenance versus what the rent would be, and versus what our additional obligation for maintenance would be? I mean, it sounds like that increases our obligation far greater than the $576K.
All right, well, it's a good question. I'll tell you what I think about that. I think SOPAC is already maintaining the building. I think they're maintaining it in a way far less expensively than any outside person could maintain it, so I don't think that's going to change. That's already part of the budget.
But that shifts to the village if the village takes over the building, is what you're suggesting.
No, I'm suggesting that the village owns the building, but the maintenance and the servicing of the building continues to be on SOPAC, coming out of SOPAC's budget. I think the only difference would be that the $15 million loan will not be paid back. That you'll accept it as an asset, and the township, I guess, will pay if monies were borrowed back and eventually own the building. But no other expenses should pass through.
Well, there would obviously be large capital expenses, right? At some point, the building will need a new roof, or it needs, carpeting, or it needs a new air conditioning system.
That's correct.
Once we own the building, those become our obligations. as a
Yes, but
village.
you're absolutely correct, sir. And I would tell you, though, that if that happened and the roof blew off the building, it would be your responsibility even now because they couldn't possibly afford it. So either you would be handling it, or they would come to you and say, we need 200,000 that we don't have. So I think that you have already. I think the maintenance you wouldn't inherit, I think it would stay with the building, and it would be kind of, if you look at SOPAC as the benefit to the community financially that it is overall, and figure it's bringing in $2 million plus in revenue to the town, I think the town has to almost donate the facility. There'd be some rent, and part of that rent would be, to your point, complete maintenance, which I think they're already doing a terrific job at. And some of that is not money, some of that is labor, but you certainly wouldn't need to.
That's a really good point. In all practicality, we own the building.
Yes.
And if there is something that major happens, we're going to have to, meaning the village is going to have to take care of it. So since that is the fact, and if converting this into an asset will then allow them to be in a better position to get aggressively and go after grant funding and improve their odds, because that big, deficit number is not there. Because from my limited understanding of the financial aspect of when someone is putting out a grant is when the grantors see such a big debt, then they're concerned that the money that they give is going to go into operations as opposed to programming.
Exactly right.
And that means...
Or worse, debt service.
Right. And then that means that they won't. It's very hard to be successful.
Yes, I think when somebody looks and sees that kind of debt, they can't help but assume that they're going to use some of the money to service that debt, and which we don't want them to do, but it would be a natural assumption, yes.
Now, let me play devil's advocate. There are some people who have said, out of their frustration, which rightfully so, everyone should be frustrated, because the initial decision to do this, the idea having, in my opinion, to digress a moment, was a great idea, but how the whole financial package and stuff was done the wrong way. You normally get out, you get people to contribute, you have a vision, you have a campaign, and you build the building, as opposed to go out and bonding and putting the whole village in debt. But it's done. It's like a baby's born, it's
Yes.
here. With that said, some comments have been made, well, just let them go into bankruptcy. But that doesn't solve anything. We still have to pay the debt.
Well, it's far worse than that. Not only do you have to pay the debt, but the $2 million that are coming into the town as a result of them, that disappears too. So even if you take the $575 off the $2 million, you drop $1.5 million a year to the downtown, So I think there's no way that could be a possibility without really shooting yourselves in the foot. So you're absolutely right. It's here to stay. And it is a benefit. But the idea of letting it go bankrupt, not only would it be a financial disaster if you just look at the numbers, but I think there are certain ratables and financial costs that you have that would go way up if SOPAC disappeared. Not only, you already own the building, so you got that. Then what are you going to do with the spot? Aside from the fact you lose $1.5 million, what are you going to do? You'd be responsible for the building anyway. You can turn it into offices and spend another $5 million. So you're absolutely right. We're in it. It is a good thing, and I really think it needs to be supported. It's not like a dying division of a company that you phase out and morph into something else. This was built to only be one thing, and it kind of needs to be that thing.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just a comment. You just mentioned one of them, but you didn't put a dollar value to two of the areas, one being the in-kind services that SOPAC provides to the village, and the other one, the value of the ratables that SOPAC creates with the properties that are around SOPAC. Do you have any handle or estimate of what that value is?
Well, as far as the in-kind services to start with, okay, if we even go to the earlier point of maintaining the building, if we start with that and we add all of the different programs in the city, you certainly be, in my view, we're kind of off the top of my head because it wasn't something I looked at, but certainly that's $300,000-$400,000 if you had to hire outside people to do all that stuff. I mean, that goes away right away. Those programs alone, this is done, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but a lot of these people who volunteer their time over and above what they're paid. So you certainly got hundreds of thousands of dollars there. As far as the ratables are concerned, I can tell you that I read several reports about what a performing arts center does to the real estate values of the town. Okay, and the best estimate I can give you is that there's an overall rise of 12 to 18% in the downtown area surrounding SOPAC. So if you added up everything we have there and dropped it by 15%, which would be many, many millions of dollars, I think that would be a fair answer to that question. And if, to your point, we closed it, you'd probably drop 25 or 30% because you'd have a degentrification. So I think you're talking, probably about $300,000 in real money that you would have to spend, and certainly millions in the value of the real estate surrounding it. I mean, it's a really desirable downtown area when it's around. And by the way, every other institution of its kind that I was able to see did, and the ones I studied nationwide, all had the same effect. The downtown area benefited 12, 15, 17%. So I think that's the best answer I could give you there.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Very
coming in
welcome.
tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And this report should be available online on our website shortly. A hard copy of it?
Right, you're sending something on the website.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Oh, yeah. That's a hard copy.
yeah, no, I'm saying, what word? It's a big document.
I see. Okay. Our next presentation this evening is from Redflex. If there's gentlemen, just
And just to introduce for background of what this is, we've been talking for a while about the consideration of installing automated red light traffic cameras in town, and we talked about public safety. There was some discussion, and we brought it back here to the board. There were a number of questions, and the consensus of the Public Safety Committee was have the vendor come here directly to speak to all of us and present, and then you guys could ask questions directly as you see fit.
thank you, Mike.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Andrew Sinclair. I'm with Princeton Public Affairs Group. We're the largest government affairs firm in New Jersey. We represent Redflex Traffic Systems. Peter McNerney is here from Redflex. It's the largest red light camera provider in the world. And Redflex operates the longest running and the largest red light camera program in the pilot program in New Jersey, which is Newark, New Jersey. Redflex also has a program in another college town, New Brunswick, and will soon be beginning operation in Springfield, not too far away from you. I guess to make it perhaps easier on the committee, we understand you've had some discussions already on red light cameras in general and the New Jersey pilot program. Perhaps if you prefer, we could open it up to questions and have more of a conversation and a dialogue, if you'd like, rather than us just talking at you for...
Well, what I would
Maybe if you can briefly just give like a 1 or 2 minute kind of summary and overview of what you've done for other towns and what you're proposing to do here.
Thank you, that's what I wanted.
Hi, once again, my name is Peter McNerney, and I took some notes because I thought that might be a good way to start. Let me start out by saying there's absolutely no out-of-pocket cost for this entire turnkey program. We do everything associated with this except for one thing. We present evidence to the police, and only the police can make a determination on whether or not the evidence we present merits a citation. And once they do that, they tell us electronically, and we print and mail. We don't collect our fees until you collect your paid citations, so there's never a cash flow challenge. We work very closely with the Department of Transportation and the AOC, and one of the reasons the AOC likes our program so much is because it eliminates the he said, she said. Is everyone familiar with AOC?
No.
No, I'm sorry. It's the Administration of Court Judges. And they actually, that's actually how the money flows. There's no difference in the money flow from my receiving a red light violation here in South Orange, where I'd write a check to the municipal court, would be upstream to the courts and drop down once a month. So there's no change in the money flow. We don't touch the money. We provide maintenance for the life of the contract. So there's no obligation by anybody to do any maintenance on the program. We provide poles. I don't know if you've noticed the poles. Mayor Booker asked us to match the streetscape in Newark. So when you see those fluted poles with our cameras on it, those are our poles. And we could put it on existing infrastructure, but if you do that, then you assume the liability. But on our poles, we assume the liability. So what happens? A person either intentionally or unintentionally runs a red light. They're crossing the stop bar with the light in the red phase. Our cameras are able to capture that incident. We have still cameras, which is the prima facie evidence, presents a shot of the vehicle behind the stop bar with the light in the red phase, of the same vehicle in the intersection with the light in the same red phase, and we have another dedicated camera capturing the license plate. We have a video camera that provides a context for the incident. There is potential defense that you're being forced into the intersection by an emergency vehicle with their lights on. If that were the case, they'd be in the video. So what we've done in New Jersey, we not only run the largest program, we run the smallest program too in Stratford. And we've got some pretty powerful statistics on what the change in behavior has been in terms of bad driving. In fact, we've got a handout, it's a report by the Department of Transportation, and showing a dramatic decrease in crashes and red light violations. We also have some statistics from Newark. They gave us 4 intersections randomly, and they showed us the change in the driving behavior by types of crashes from when they had no cameras and when they have cameras. And I know there was some concern about rear-end collisions. Well, in the 4 that we have, and we'll distribute it, there was no change in one and a decrease, a good decrease in all the other ones. Overall crashes were also down in all the intersections. So the program runs very successfully. It's not a new type of thing. We've been doing this in 24, 25 states throughout the United States, 11 countries in the world, and wherever we do it, there's a dramatic change in safety, and a serious decrease in bad driving behavior. And we, you know, in promoting a safer city, we also understand that that is a component in economic revitalization. We've seen that too many places to make that an anecdote. That's a real deal. So I'm going to turn this back to Andrew. If you've got any questions for me on how the program works or anything about red flags, please let me know.
Well, one of the, I think we're all probably going to have a couple questions. I know one of the first ones that came to mind just when you spoke about the accidents Have you ever put a camera in an intersection and found that there was no change? Or is basically every intersection on every street, are people running red lights in a way that these systems would prevent?
That's a great question. And one of the things we do ahead of time is we have an intersection analysis. And we know if there's a problem to begin with. And we get guidance from the police department. We've been working with Chief Shalell, and he's been providing us with problematic intersections. He asked us to do an intersection analysis on one of them, and that was South Orange Ave and Scotland Road. We did a 12-hour study back on April 8th, 2010. Now, there's left turn violations, straight turn violations, and right turn violations. We're just going to mention the straights. Going westbound, there were 19 straight red light runners in 12 hours. Eastbound, there were 20 in 12 hours. That was a Thursday. And the period probably took place from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's the kind of thing you don't see. You're at that intersection and you go through it, and you might see a red light runner, you might not. But
when you do that analysis, is there a time component to it as far as how much time after the light turned red that the person went through the intersection? For example, are all 19 or 20 of those people who just barely went through the yellow light, or they thought it was yellow and it was red, or are these people blatantly running red lights?
Well, it's both. I mean, it's difficult to quantify just barely. But I mean, there's an orange light, which according to the law tells you you're supposed to stop. So you have a warning. In addition, we had suggested a sign to the Department of Transportation, and now it's a state mandate. There's a fairly large sign that said this intersection is enforced by photo. So and I can tell you this, that the physics of this has been challenged everywhere. It hasn't been challenged in New Jersey probably because people have seen the studies from other states. But we've never failed a challenge of that type.
If I can make just one more point on that.
You have to speak it right into the mic.
New Jersey, the way they've developed the pilot program is taken a very conservative approach. And you have to apply to the Department of Transportation for permission, essentially. And red light cameras are only going up in places with a documented safety problem. So it's really the handful of intersections that are absolutely the worst in particular towns. So there hasn't been a situation like that you start your question with like that, because they're looking at sort of the worst of the worst.
Well, one of the I guess one of the questions I would have, and I don't know if this might be too much to ask for offhand, but is the accidents that are caused in these intersections, are they typically caused by people who just missed the red light, or are they typically caused by people who are 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds afterwards? I don't imagine that it's equal among all time periods, and that there's a certain type of red light runner that's worse than others. So I'm just curious if there's any
crashes. We would defer to the police on that.
Okay.
They have the data. We don't have that. In fact, when we prepare the DOT application on behalf of the township, we use crash data that comes from either the police department or Rutgers actually provides crash data. And I'm not certain they have that level of detail with regard to the crash.
Yeah, I have a question about the...
Can I just color that, because I think that's a great question.
You have to go to the mic.
As I mentioned before, you've got two types of runners, intentional and unintentional. The ones that we see that are split second, those people are speeding, dramatically speeding often. They're trying to beat the light, and they just miss it. The people who are unintentional, generally they're cruising through that red light 4 or 5 seconds after it turned red, not thinking about it. And listen, I've done it myself, so I know it happens. But those, so you've got the just barely, but they're almost all traveling way too fast.
I have a question. You mentioned the pilot program, and maybe you could explain a little bit more about that. From what I understand, our ace reporter here, when he did a story on this a while ago, that apparently there's what he said is there's 25 towns, municipalities in the state of New Jersey that are in the pilot program or allowed in the pilot program. Maybe you could help us understand if that's true, how many are allowed in, how many are currently in, and what kind of capacity is there for more?
The law that we worked on and doesn't put a limit on the number of towns. Today, as of today, the Department of Transportation has approved 25 municipalities. They've decided to do a study to analyze intersections that have been approved and have been up and running. They plan on revisiting the policy in terms of the number of towns, what the appropriate number is. They're going to revisit that a little bit later this year once they do their second study.
So there's no cap at 25?
No, there's no statutory cap whatsoever. In fact, there's huge demand. And one of the things we want to express to you tonight is that you want to get going now. You want to apply now. Let us do that for you. It's really, there's no downside to the township making application to the department. Again, we do all the work for you. But there's a queue essentially, and you want to get in. You want to get in the queue before.
Have there been towns that have applied and have been turned down because their intersections didn't qualify essentially?
Yes, and that's because the state has taken a very conservative viewpoint of this, and so and part of that is to protect against any political fallout there would be if cameras went up for where there wasn't a safety problem. It's really, frankly, to protect the town. So they have a very conservative criteria. There's three major parts to it. Right?
And I have one more question, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. On the assumption, if we were to say, yes, we want to go ahead with this, help us understand the process. Do you survey all of the intersections with traffic lights? Did the police department say, well, these are our three big problem areas, and you focus on there?
Essentially,
help us understand
in almost
how it works.
every case, we defer to the police. The police know better than anyone where the safety problem is. They have the crash data, and that's the number one criteria for the DOT for us to look at. Red light running is a part of it, but it's actually the crash data that is the most important. And we were looking at other intersections. We've done a study for you already on South Orange Avenue in Scotland, right out here. But we were looking at the one by South Mountain Elementary School, for instance. We want to look. Our instinct is that that's a good intersection there. That's West South Orange Avenue and Wyoming Avenue. We're kind of eager to get out there and take a look at that intersection, do an analysis, look at the crash data. Our guts tell us that's a pretty good candidate for you. Plus, with the elementary school there, it's another added benefit, safety benefit there.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
For right turn on red, so this camera would also monitor the right turn on red?
Yes.
And so if they don't come to a stop, does that also generate a ticket, or that doesn't generate a ticket?
Well, if you violate the law, the camera's going to photograph you, but at the end of the day, it's the police discretion.
Okay, but is there any stats on what happens with right turns on red on those things, or we don't?
Well, I would just say that typically, when someone's rolling through the red, and maybe they're traveling 5 miles an hour, they don't touch their brakes, there's no pedestrian in the view,
Right.
Police don't ever issue.
Okay.
I mean, it's generally egregious.
I know it's a complaint that came up, and I know in one of the states it was one of the issues that raised a concern. I think it was Florida that had a big issue. The second thing is these things are as effective at nighttime as they are in the daytime.
Very much so, yeah.
And for those who were that Big Brother type of thing, are these cameras, are these pictures or the video, is it ever used for anything else other than just for the red lights? Or is it used for crime?
The law specifies that the information is not discoverable.
Okay.
The information belongs to the town.
Okay.
It's our hardware, it's all the pictures, they belong to you. So, but of course, those pictures could be subpoenaed in a criminal investigation.
And what was I don't know if you said it before, if we did it, I apologize. What was the guesstimated revenue per red light camera for a town?
Well,
And was it enough to cover the deficit of SOPAC that they asked for?
well, you might think this is a little, that didn't, I was tuned into that very much so. And you're going to think that I made this up, but I guesstimated on 5 intersections, which would generally mean 10 approaches, because we normally would do a north-south or an east-west. So it would be 2 approaches per intersection. Based on that, based on a guesstimate of 200 violations a month per approach, that translates into about $600,000.
No further questions, you're hired.
Yeah, but it's really, I want it to be in the context of public safety as opposed to how we can reduce the SOPAC deficit. I'd like to hear from the chief.
Can I ask a question when the chief is
Yeah,
coming?
before we get to that, I have a number of questions,
I
so
have
go
a
ahead.
question. We have a traffic guard that stands at the corner of Scotland and South Orange Avenue. So let's say he waves me on. You guys are going to catch me in the camera, right? Going through the light, even though I've been waved through. How do you deal with something like that?
We deal with it all the time. You know, very often well, for instance, when there's a game at the Prue Center, the police just say, we're going to be waving traffic through there. And so they just tell us what hours that's going to happen. And you know, we've got places with sporting events all over the country. So the police communicate to us. So it's similar, analogous to somebody just waving them through. But I can tell you this, remember, that person is going to be in the video. Police
that
are
was
gonna,
the question. He'll be in the video.
The police will be
All right.
reviewing it, and they'll see that person waving you through.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I sent an email on Friday that had a number of questions. Are you prepared to answer specifically any of those questions? Because so far I haven't heard any answers.
Well, I think one of the questions is about rear-end collisions. Most of the other questions really have to be answered by the chief and the police department, because it's your data. But do you have those questions there?
I don't.
I do. We read them or?
Well, if you're not prepared to answer them, there's no reason to.
Yeah, we need the questions.
Okay.
You have them printed?
They did too. They told me they got them today.
We'll go down the list.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. This about the crash data at the intersection, for your second question. The accidents that we've had at Scotland and South Orange, in 2010 there was 5, in 2011 there was none. The reason in 2010 that we chose that intersection was not based upon crash data, it was based upon the heaviest flow of traffic. If we were to choose to go to a red light camera system, I think what we would do is probably go based upon, we would look at all the intersections at that time. We would go now, I guess, for our application and then look at all the intersections and see which ones were the busiest at that time in terms of accidents. That wasn't done. That was done here just because of the flow of traffic.
But if DOT is only going to find a red light camera warranted based on crash data primarily, then what difference does it make that it's heavy? I mean, one of the concerns that I have apropos of the heaviness of traffic, especially since we traffic calm South Orange Avenue, you know, rush hour is hell here, and the last thing I want to do is slow it down beyond the crawl that already exists now. And I think that people are making a lot of right turns on red and other maneuvers which you know, are perfectly safe, although they may actually be technically unlawful. And it's only since I started thinking about this subject that I started asking myself, well, why is right turn prohibited at this intersection or that intersection, so on and so forth. So I would want to see a very robust study of not only the crash data, because I think what you're telling me is I can't expect to see improvement in that, or at least it would be statistically insignificant, because we don't even have a problem with that.
Now, why you have right turn on red, I guess is decided by a village engineer and the Department of Transportation for right turn on red. It's a safety issue, I believe. Is why you have
Well,
red on red.
that's what I'm second
I don't
guessing that though.
decide.
I'm
Yeah,
saying
sure
what
that's
is
a
the
safety
safety issue? Because For instance, out here, there's no turn prohibited. I have to tell you, until we started discussing this, and I noticed the other day the sign, I never knew that, and every day when I come here to this meeting, I come up from work on Prospect, I make a left on South Orange Avenue, and if there's nobody in the intersection and it's perfectly safe because the sight distance is very good, I make a right turn and I come into the Village Hall parking lot.
I think you were one of the cars in 2010.
Undoubtedly.
No, but I actually, I think it may have to do with sight vision, but I think somebody from the DOT, I don't know, may have an answer for that.
Well, obviously, I defer to the village engineer's, professional qualifications,
Probably
but
somebody from the county that decides where it is. I'm sure it has something to do with sight vision, maybe the crossing, the amount of people that cross that intersection. I'm not a traffic, I don't claim to be a traffic expert. That's probably who decides that, I would say.
I guess what I'm saying, when I raised this question initially, before I got into the very specific questions that I raised in the email, but the last time the BOT discussed this, what I said is the places, especially Newark, which I frequent a lot, is, because you can't tell where there's a camera and not. It looks like there's a camera everywhere now, even in Podunk. And it's sort of emasculated the right turn on red system that we have in New Jersey, which was designed to conserve fuel and to continue with traffic flow. And everybody's frozen now. It's like, I don't know, because, back here there might be a sign, or, maybe somebody ran over the sign or ripped down the sign, or, teenagers took it and put it in their dorm room or something like that. I don't know. But that's the first question.
Yeah.
There was a long list.
There's a long list.
All right, I had a global question for the chief. Are you an advocate for this program, and why?
I am, because I think I see red light cameras as almost like a workforce multiplier for me, because we're fortunate enough in South Orange that a lot of issues are traffic. I mean, my colleagues in towns around me would like to have some of the problems that I have. So it's like a workforce multiplier. When people can come to me with traffic concerns, this would, abate some of those concerns. I can put somebody, instead if they say, can you put a car at this intersection, really a patrol car at an intersection, I'm not going to get many violators that way, because you're going to see a marked car. When I'm marked Crown Victoria, people are going to stop at that. So I think it would assist us in a way. And I think it would more or less, I see red light cameras as serving somewhat as, not maybe a specific deterrent, but as a general deterrent, because I can tell you that I go through Newark, and I know that Newark has them all over. I drive very carefully through Newark, unless we're following somebody, but I do know that I drive slowly through Newark. They're all over Newark, and I think people have changed their driving habits a little bit because of that.
Okay.
So to your point, Janine, I understand about South Orange Avenue and the rush hour call, but I think the real issue with the red lights, cars speeding through it, is more in the off hours. And I often notice, when I'm walking the dog at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, people blow through lights, they slow down to them, especially at the Wyoming intersection, South Orange Avenue intersection. I often see cars, they slow down, but they blow through it as if there was no light there. And I see it at Ridgewood.
Mark, I don't think I can hear you.
And I see it at Ridgewood Road all the time too. But I don't think the problem is in the rush hours. I think the problem is in the non-rush hours, and more likely. And while it may not be a lot of crash data, there is a lot of concern, and you do have to look 2-3 times before you cross the street.
I think you're right. I think it's not in the rush hour, and what I'm concerned about is this is going to make rush hour a lot worse, because people are not going to be making the maneuvers that they do. And when I looked at the signal timing,
but the guard's there at rush hour. That's when he's out in the morning and the afternoon rush hour. He's the one waving people through.
I know that.
So, I think they would probably be getting people outside of rush hour, because he's going to be there waving people through during rush hour.
I don't see rush hour as the problem.
I have another question, if I may, for the gentleman. Can these I've heard mixed answers to that. I'm curious, for the record. Can these cameras be used for any other purposes? God forbid there's a stolen car reported, a murder, a riot, a burglary, a robbery. Can the data from these cameras be used for other purposes other than this?
With a court order, yes. So the police would have to work with the judge on that.
Okay.
Quite frankly, we're just not aware that law's been tested yet on it. So, but the law does say that, under we wrote the law, when the law was being drafted, we wrote it with the administrative officer reports. They were very specific about that they wanted to give judge flexibility to use it. But in terms of the, but I can't cite a specific example from Newark or any of our other partner cities when they did that. I'm just not familiar with that.
But it has been done, as far as you know?
I don't know that it has or hasn't.
But
the law doesn't.
but the law does allow it with a court order.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
but it's not here.
And just also, it's not subject to Oprah. We were very careful about that as well.
Just one other thing on the signal timing. The signal timing on South Orange Avenue is between 3 seconds and 4 seconds for the yellow. So going to the village president's question about the red, the first part of the red before the oncoming traffic or the cross street traffic is allowed to go, they don't have the green yet. In other words, the red clearance. Can you tell us how many people, for instance, on South Orange Avenue in Scotland, that you caught, quote unquote, going through the red light were in the red clearance? Because I think that's the key thing for me, because people are trying to clear the intersection, especially because it's so, traffic moves so slowly and it's so crowded. I mean, if somebody's blowing by at 9 o'clock at night, great, they deserve a ticket, and the police should, have some workforce.
Do you mean people who are blocking the box, so to speak? That's what they, yeah.
I realize they
We
call
don't
it
count
that.
those in our intersection analysis.
Well, how do you distinguish that? Because
Well, they're stuck. They're stuck. They're stuck because somebody didn't clear the box, the square.
Well, what you're saying is they're already beyond the stop line when it's yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm asking the next person who goes through when
It's red?
in the red clearance. Yes, in the 2 seconds that it remains red or something like that, before the oncoming traffic or the side street traffic is going.
Yeah, I'm not following that.
I think what you're asking when one direction turns red, but before the delay, before the other direction turns green. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, there's a clearance interval after the yellow. How many of the tickets are in the clearance interval?
I'm still not following it. I'm sorry.
The question is how many of the tickets that are issued through this are done in the 2 or 3 second delay after the light turns red, and let's say you're going eastbound, but before the other direction turns green. So the delay between that almost every town has. I don't think Hoboken has them. Some cities don't, where the lights change at the exact same time.
Split phase.
Whatever terms we're using, I think the question is how many tickets are issued in that time period versus after that.
Only the red light violators.
Right, but
That's 100%. He answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question that is slightly off to the subject. Are these cameras used in other states for other uses such as speeding?
Yes. In fact, we do stop sign enforcement in Los Angeles. We do rail crossing in Texas. We do bus enforcement, which is a growing thing. But each of these items need specific legislation.
Yeah, and the next part of the question, has that been brought up in New Jersey as passing some legislation to support that?
Andrew's actually working on that.
Yeah, the legislature has not considered a bill yet that would for
Yeah.
speed enforcement. We don't see that in any time in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
The legislators are getting tickets.
Yeah, right.
But if I could, just back to Trustee Bauer's questions, we would love to do some further analysis for you. We want to be in South Orange. We think you have some safety issues here. We'd like to continue to work, provide you with information. We'd like to do another analysis at the intersection that I referenced, and work with the chief on looking at others as well. We don't like to make application to DOT on behalf
a little
of
closer to the mic.
on behalf of our partner towns unless it's going to be a winning application. That's been our reputation, so we'd like to continue to work with the town.
And what is kind of the timeline in the process? Again, should we decide to go ahead, help us understand the process and the timeline for this approval from time of go ahead till time of installation?
Well, as we sit here today, because the DOT has stopped approving municipalities beyond the 25 towns that they currently have in the pilot, I mean, they're going to, as I mentioned at the outset of the conversation, they're going to revisit that limit that they put in themselves. It's not in the law. Later this year. Right now, what we would do is we would spend time on the application, get it into DOT probably within 30 to 45 days of entering into a contract with South Orange. But again, the department is not approving them right now. So I can't give you an answer on approval, but I can certainly tell you how long, within that 45-day window, we'll get an application in and all the supporting documentation that's required.
And if they weren't at that 25 town limit?
Sorry, good point, forgive me. The DOT is encouraging applications. So again, you're in competition here with your neighbors. I'm sorry, to your question.
I was going to say, if they weren't at that 25 town limit, what have you seen historically? What's that approval time frame? And
they approve them in batches. So it's been, if you were to graph it, it would look like that. When they open it up again, I presume they will, the DOT is under a lot of pressure to open up the program. One reason why we're here tonight is because we're confident they're going to have more towns. It's just a question of when they start approving. I assume they're going to approve a big bucket once they start approving it again. Because there are, I would say, another 50 towns in the queue with another 50 applications pending. So we want to suggest to you that you sort of get in the game.
okay, thank you.
I have additional question. 1 day's worth of data doesn't seem to be a significant count. If you were to go ahead and do, again, a benchmark, would you look at more data than just 1 day?
Well,
Microphone.
I guess we could do that, but I mean, when you get 1 day where you've got 19 straight-throughs on a weekday, what we have found is it doesn't matter whether we do it in good weather, in bad weather, as long as it's a weekday, we find the same statistics showing up time and time again where there's an issue. And I can tell you this, of all the states we operate in, there's no higher traffic volumes than New Jersey, by a lot. And, I mean...
Violators.
Well, you guys know that you're in the most densely populated state. You're in the corridor between New York and, those other cities.
The other part of the question is that once you put the system in, at what point is it economically feasible for you to keep the system, given people know about the red light?
Yeah. Right.
You change the break point.
That's a great question. We never take them out, and because we never get to zero. We don't even get close to zero. What we found is that after 13 months, there's a national figure, and it really probably doesn't apply to New Jersey, but after 13 months, we have a 52% change in behavior, bad driving behavior. That's across the board, but we're specifically interested here in red light violations. It doesn't get much lower. Now, we can't explain why that's true, but we can only guess that each year there's a new batch of teenagers, each year the senior citizens are a year older, and some people... That's me, So, and some people, you can't change their behavior, no matter what. Chief knows that better than any of us, I think. So it levels off, but we were on the largest program in the world in the city of Chicago. We've been there since 2004, and it's just amazing. We have 400 cameras in there because the city has asked us to put 400 cameras in there, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell you how much the city budgets for red light camera revenue in Chicago. So I won't tell you. But in any event, there's substantial safety benefits.
You've mentioned a couple numbers this evening and some national statistics. Do you have a document that details everything that you've done, case studies of some of the other towns in New Jersey?
Well, yeah.
I know it sounded like you had brought something tonight.
And their response to our RFP too was a binder literally about yay thick that has lots of documentation, but I'll let them answer directly.
What was the recommendation of the Public Safety Committee on this?
To discuss it here.
And the chief is in favor of this?
Yeah, chief supported it.
Can I ask, just trying to understand this, there's an intersection where right on red is permitted, and then we have intersections where it's not permitted. These are used in both?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a problem, we could do both, sure.
No, I mean, generally, and I guess the one question is, if it's an intersection where right on red is permitted,
Yeah.
are there violations for right on red for not stopping long enough, or are those just off the table and you only go with the straight through?
Well, that's police discretion. I mean, you know,
But would the camera trigger it as a violation? Does it have a built-in time period of how long somebody has to pause before they make the right on red, or would the system trigger that as a violation, then the police would review it?
If you wanted to, I mean, we could customize it so that it doesn't or it does.
Okay, and then on the intersections that have right on red prohibited, statistically, is there a percentage breakdown on how many of the violations are straight throughs and how many are right on reds?
Yeah, you're generally going to have 2 to 3 times the amount of red light violations on a right turn
Versus straight through?
versus straight throughs, yeah. And, you know, we're continuously, we hear the stories, and they're all anecdotal, but it's, in fact, Andrew's got a friend, that's another story, but the person, I stopped, I hit the brakes, and when they look at the video, they're going 14 miles an hour, and they never touch their brakes. I mean, it happens, we see it all the time, every day, all day. So, it's, you know, it's, you want it to stop, you feel, you know you're supposed to stop, and you think you did stop, but you didn't.
Okay. All right, unless there are any other questions, thank you, gentlemen, for
thank you.
the information tonight.
When are we making a decision on this, or just?
We can add this as a discussion item for our next meeting.
Okay.
Move forward from there.
I know we had an extension until the end of March with our RFP, and I know that, I guess the purchasing agent has to ask for an additional extension?
Yeah.
That's fine.
You'll get that, yeah, no problem.
Great.
Thank you very, very much for your time and questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, we have minutes that need approval from our March 12th meeting.
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It looks as though we have a number of guests tonight, so I would like to move public comments to right now for our business.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't want to stay longer? That's odd.
There's nothing more exciting
I
than hearing an ordinance read.
I thought they were here for the red flag stuff.
Could someone
They are
maybe
now.
grab the sign-off sheet in the back there? Yeah, well. Okay. We've got a number of people signed up here, and we have quite a bit of business to get to for the rest of the night. So if I could ask every member of the public to kindly limit yourselves to 3 minutes when you come up and speak, we would really appreciate that. The first person on the list, Sharon? And when you come up to the podium, if you could just say your name and your address, please.
Hi, I'm Sharon Pigeon at 412 Bose Avenue. I saw that there was a historic commission study that was done a few years ago and a historic preservation ordinance that I believe was presented in November. Was unable, when looking online, to find any follow-up on that or even the ordinance itself. I'm wondering if you could comment on what the status of that ordinance is, what the next steps are, and what kind of timeline?
We've met a couple of times with members of the Historic Commission in the Montrose Historic District and the village attorney and a couple trustees. There's been a couple of meetings with those groups. There's another one's, have I sent them out? I haven't heard back from a couple of the key players. There's been 2 redrafts of the ordinance done, one by the village attorney, one by Trustee Bauer. And we have to go over those redrafts of the ordinance at that next meeting. I don't know the date yet, though. But we sent it to the Historic Commission members and to the Montrose Park Historic Commission.
So is the next step for you to review, or are you
No,
waiting
the
on
next step is for
something
this
from
group to
them?
review. The next step is for this group of us and those members who have been interested to review it and then bring it back to the full board.
And the timeline for that is?
I would say that the meeting, well, I think I sent out a couple of dates for meetings in late March, early April. That means we present it to the full board at the end of April,
Is there anything that can be done to move that forward? Or,
if the group wants to, yeah. But they've done 2 redrafts, so.
and the members of that group are?
There's a few people from the Montrose Park Historic District, a couple of members from the South
Historical
Orange Historic
Society.
Commission. Trustee Bauer's been at the meetings, Trustee Goldberg,
Planning and
Trustee
Zoning
Gould,
Committee.
Planning and Zoning Committee, myself, and the village attorney. And if somebody else wants to come, just leave your email with the, we put it on the calendar anyway, the date, the village calendar, but you can leave your email with the village clerk and I'll make sure you get the email. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, Ladding?
We can skip my turn. I was actually going to ask a question very similar to Sharon, so I think everything is covered.
Okay,
Neighbor.
thank you.
But thank you.
Maris Willis?
Hi, we've got about 4 of us who are going to say something from the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race. I'm Meredith Sue Willis. I live on Prospect Street. I've been in South Orange for almost 25 years, going up fast. We're speaking on the issue of the strong possibility that you are giving signs you're not going to fund the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race. I want to say a couple of things about the United States. I love my country. It's a beautiful country. When the flag flies, my heart flutters. It's still a country that has a great deal of difficulty with race. Evidence of this is when a 17-year-old kid can be shot dead for walking into a gated community in Florida. Another evidence of this is when white people flee from communities, when too many people of color in their minds begin to move in. We're lucky to live in South Orange. South Orange is a community where people have a culture of integration. We're happy to be integrated. We're proud of being integrated. There's a reason that we have integration here. It is not something that happens naturally the way birds sing and butterflies flutter. It's something that happens when people work intentionally to make integration and inclusion a reality. This community and its sister community, Maplewood, have been fortunate to have an organization whose sole objective has been to create integration and inclusion. You all know about this. Some of you have been very supportive. Mark was a longtime member of the coalition representing you folks. He understands it. I know Deborah understands it. I just saw Janine at our Martin Luther King celebration. Some of you I've never seen at our meetings. We've been doing this for 15 years. If we stop doing it, there will be a strong possibility that negative changes will happen to South Orange in the area of integration. So we're asking you to reconsider, to put your money where your mouth is, because this is not something that happens for nothing. It's not something that happens without work. And our organization, with the pittance that is given to us by Maplewood and the pittance that is given to us by you over the years, plus many donations from citizens, have allowed us to have conversations, have allowed us to have actions in real estate, and these are things that require intention, they require commitment, they require support, both as well as coming to things they require that you give us money. We really need this. You're now going to hear from Liz McMahon, from Alan Noel, and from Assemblywoman Myla Jacey. So Liz is next.
Thank you.
It's your job, it's not mine.
It's okay.
Thank you. My name is Liz McMahon. I live at 36 Fairview Avenue in South Orange. I've been a resident for 28 years, and I was on the Board of Trustees for 4 years from 1993 to 1997. During that time in 1996, I was one of the founding members of the Community Coalition on Race, and it's been a wonderful experience and relationship for the last 15 years for all of us that have been a part of it. So I would come here tonight just requesting that you consider what Sue and other folks here will be saying this evening and really look at what your contribution has done to help leverage the work that we have been able to accomplish in the community over the last 15 years. We're truly a diverse and inclusive community, and in doing all the kinds of things that we have done, we have brought so many folks into our community because of this. We have over 1,000 volunteers over the last 15 years that have run over 250 programs, bringing in over $1 million in the 15 years that we have been in existence through in-kind contributions, bake sales, programs, projects, grants, all sorts of things. And this has enabled us to do what other folks behind me will talk about this evening. So please consider this. It's really a serious contribution on your part to make the commitment to the community that we can move forward with this important project to really intentionally continue to maintain our diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Noel.
Good evening. My name is Alan Noel. I live at 188 West Fairview Avenue here in South Orange. I am a 21-year resident of South Orange. One of the reasons that my family came to South Orange was because my wife wanted, and I emphasize my wife wanted to live here in this town.
Just make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay. My wife was very influential in moving our family here because of the diversity. When we arrived into South Orange 21 years ago, there was the beginning of what has subsequently been avoided was the white flight. That as more people of color started moving into South Orange, more people had the indication or would believe that the town was somehow being infiltrated and was not as an attractive place to live. However, I'm sure with the efforts, not solely the efforts of the Community Coalition on Race, but an integral part of that effort to stem that tide was the Community Coalition on Race. I recently had a conversation with my 23-year-old son who grew up in this town, who went through the school system, and he is now attending Rutgers University. And he's, I did not believe that he really appreciated the diversity of this town until we sat down and had a conversation about how it has helped him assimilate or work in his environment as a Rutgers University student where he is excelling. He appreciated growing up in a town that allowed him to experience such diversity. As an accountant here in town, I prepare, I have clients that a lot of them are new to the area. One of the reasons that they come to South Orange is because South Orange Maplewood is because of that diversity. I believe that if the organization was to fold because of lack of funding or for whatever reason, there would be a change in the tenor here, and it would be a strong possibility that we would revert back to what it was or the trend that was developing 21 years ago. And I think that would be a travesty to this community. The coalition serves as a model and has been recognized as a model for other communities, for other organizations that want to get where we are. So for this board to consider not funding, I think would be a travesty to this town and to the residents there that reside here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. It's good to see everybody, and I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes to share my thoughts with you about the coalition. I've been a member and supporter of the coalition since its inception. I spent almost 10 years on the touring committee. I don't know how many of you had the pleasure of taking that tour, but it was a lot of fun to do. And I'm happy to say that some of the people that I toured bought houses here. And my husband and I have lived here in South Orange since 1978. And we choose to stay here because of the type of town that it has become. It was not always this vibrant, bustling downtown, and it was not always as diverse as it is today. And when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about economic diversity, racial diversity, and religious diversity, all of which are important. We are truly a unique community. As a Board of Education member, I valued the workshops presented by the committees, the preschool open house held every year, and the neighborhood associations that were nurtured and continued to grow through the work of the coalition. Now as a state legislator, and I'm very proud to be your state representative, I find many opportunities to share the goals and mission of the coalition. And that's what I wanted to tell you about tonight. I think it's important for you to know that the coalition is really poised to move to another level. Another level in terms of being a model to other communities. What do I mean by that? Last summer, it's almost summer again, but last summer I attended a forum at the White House under the auspices of Building One America. And the purpose of that meeting was to meet with elected officials from around the country to talk about older suburbs or first suburbs, of which we are a prime example. We know, I know that you know better than most, that first suburbs are tax-stressed, underfunded, under-resourced, and in dire need of support, both from the state level and the federal level. That support is not going to come without work and without intention. While I was there, I was privileged to be on a panel to talk about initiatives and innovative ideas that are being practiced in older suburbs to maintain the diversity, to bring in the resources, and to keep us from becoming abandoned altogether. I took the booklets, the reprints from the Community Coalition on Race with me to share. And they were picked up, and I ran out of them very quickly because people were very interested about this idea of intentional integration and the fact that it takes work and it takes support. And I was very proud to talk about the support, both financial and otherwise, that we get from Maplewood and South Orange. I was asked by a number of people if the coalition would be willing to share their experiences and the model with them. And I said, absolutely, I'm sure they would. Go to their website. The responses were all positive. Since last summer, I've worked with elected officials from New Jersey who represent older suburbs to build support for, quote, advancing a common sense agenda for sustainable, inclusive, and economically competitive regions. The New Jersey Regional Coalition is currently organizing county-level meetings here in New Jersey, which will culminate in a state meeting in the fall. We are in contact with the White House, and we expect a high-level representative to attend to listen to what we come up with in terms of what our needs are. I'm sure you already know, but I'll remind you that Village President Torpy and Mayor DeLuca, along with Montclair's Mayor Freed and many others, are involved in this effort. I believe that we are a model for other towns to replicate. But make no mistake, we can't do it alone. We have to continue to partner with community organizations, faith-based groups, business organizations, and the coalition, which is positioned to move beyond being just a local organization. There is great interest on the state and national level in the coalition's experience and the model that they present. South Orange has become a destination. And for those of you who weren't here back in the late 70s and the early 80s, the downtown was boarded up and dead. It was not a destination. It is now. And I believe that people want to live here because of the kind of town that we are, as you heard other people talk about. And I believe that the coalition has played a vital role in helping us become that town and has more work to do. So I encourage you to support their work in any way that you can. And I'd be happy to talk to any of you about it individually if you want to give me a call. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Alyssa Aronson.
Before I get to my topic, I want, good evening, my name is Alyssa Aronson. I'm a longtime resident of South Orange. Before I get to my topic, I want the trustees and the village president to put his money where his mouth is and fund the coalition on race. Now I'm going to get to my topic. Good evening, President Torpy, trustees.
You're doing like I do, Alyssa. I have to take my glasses off to read
I'm sorry.
close too.
Is this the board aware of the fact that one of the members has mismanaged and personal finances to the point of default? Do you believe that it's appropriate that this member should make financial decisions for the village? Is there anything you believe that you could take in the last 6 years to have South Orange to make, believe that the last 6 years, Mr. Calabrese has for the last 6 years to make South Orange better, make South Orange better since Mr. Calabrese's administration?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? So please come up to the podium and state your name and address.
Robert Chandros, 108 West Montrose Avenue, and just for the record, I've now lived here for more than 40 years. I'm here tonight to talk about the presentation on SOPAC. And quite frankly, I found it very disturbing. It seemed to me full of vague generalities with very little specifics and very little hard work done by the person doing the presentation. To talk about the value to South Orange of the Art Center by referring to national figures to me seems absolutely ludicrous. It's like talking about people going through red lights without knowing anything about the specific data. He talked about people coming into town and the value to the town of having this. Yet he did no work. He did no statistical assessment of sales tax receipts from the village, pre and post SOPAC. He did no count as to how many of the people who go to SOPAC and go to the Clearview go there 1, 5, 10, 50 times a year, as opposed to just coming up with a hard number. And he said nothing about where they come from. And yet he was ready to make cavalier statements about the economic value of that art center to the town. I think that was shameful, and I don't know what his professional qualifications are, but quite frankly, I found what he did pretty poor. We talk about servicing school children and other groups. I have advocated and will continue to advocate a fee-for-service basis so that if SOPAC is going to provide programs to school children and others, there should be an accounting of the economic cost of those programs, and it should be recognized and made public, because we don't know what those things cost. I pay enough school taxes. I don't need to pay more taxes, so SOPAC can provide programs for the school system that the school system should be ready, able, and willing to pay for. We talk about internship benefits. Again, the same thing. There's no estimate as to what these things cost. There ought to be full cost accounting. They should come up with a figure and says, this is what it costs if they do services for the town. Let this guy come up with a figure and let him say, well, if the town had to buy these services or provide it on its own, they will be X dollars of benefit. And let them be part of a budget calculation. Just don't throw it out there and say, well, they took over this. You know, Concerts in the Park existed before SOPAC. The programs at Baird existed before SOPAC. So these are not sudden, wonderful innovations that they ought to be given unadulterated support for. We do not know, and we have asked, as a member of the CBAC, I personally asked a year ago, for an annual figure of the debt service cost of SOPAC. We don't know what it's costing us. We talk about $15 million a year. That debt is now being amortized and has interest being paid on it. Yet no one's ever come out and said to the public, well, it's costing X dollars a year to service the debt for the building. He talked about very little in the terms of exploring other models for use of the building. He didn't, for example, say, well, if you close the building, you can do the following things with it and so forth. Clearly, what he did was come up with a biased study that was totally biased to prove the wonderful economic interests of the town. I'd like to see him do a real hard study, going back over 5 years before SOPAC, 5 years of SOPAC, look at sales tax receipts, look at receipts in restaurants and other places that would benefit, and show exactly what the benefits have been, and not just talk about his vast experience based on national studies, none of which he's ever spelled out to this community. I think we really need some hard, clear evidence as to what the heck is going on there before you proceed any further. Taking the building back may be a good idea, but that doesn't mean you have to continue to operate it as an art center. You might find an outside group that would be willing to rent it and operate it as an art center at a lower cost than the current group now. There was no assessment, as far as I can tell, of the quality of the management. And I'm not talking about the executive director. I'm talking about the board of directors. I'm talking about the fact that a year ago they hired a development person. I haven't seen the announcement of one grant in that year for anything. And I think it's time we ask for some hard answers. SOPAC continues to be recalcitrant to make its financial reports widely available to members of the public. They supposedly have filed their FT 990. It's not on GuideStar. It's not on the village website. I don't think it's on their website. So we have no information about what they've done in order to make a judgment. And before you enter into any kind of an agreement, and by the way, to take the building back means you have to rewrite the mortgage, because the mortgage document clearly specifies that in June of 2013 they have to start amortizing the $10 million debt on that building, and God knows what's ever going to happen with the $4 million in addition to that. And I think his report has raised as many questions as it's answered, and I would regard it as a rather weak starting point for a thorough financial analysis of what's going on here. Quite frankly, to be blunt, I think you wasted your money to hire this guy. And I think you really ought to get him to come back and do some work and not just throw down some stuff based on platitudes and what he was fed by the board of SOPAC. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind yourself and members of the community that they can download the full report, which is obviously much more extensive than the brief talk you gave tonight, and we'll have that available on the website, and it goes into the details of the study, including management, for example. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Okay, I'd like to close public comments and move on to ordinances on second reading this evening.
Can I ask you one question, Alex? On the SOPAC report, is there going to be a board discussion at the next meeting then about the report that was done?
Sure.
Okay, because I think we should discuss
Next steps.
what was in the report, what wasn't in the report, and where we should go forward with it, because, and if we want to go forward with anything.
So that's fine. I think we can discuss it in our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We have the first reading on second ordinance. The only reading on second ordinance. Read, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is ordinance 2012-03, an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of South Orange Village, section 92-3 definitions, and section 92-201, schedule 3, minimum off-street parking, to provide for bicycle storage and racks and design criteria therefore.
Okay, I'd like to open up 2012-03 for public hearing. If anybody wishes to speak about this ordinance in particular, please come forward. Seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak on this ordinance, I'd like to close the public hearing for this and open it up for board discussion.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to move it.
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So ordinance 2012-03 did pass. It's adopted as was introduced.
Thank you. We have ordinances on first reading this evening.
Thank you. Our first ordinance for introduction tonight is ordinance 2012-04. This is an ordinance to require the retrofitting of existing storm drain inlets on private property and to provide for penalties for the violation thereof.
Thank you. Which committee did this ordinance come from?
Sal.
Okay.
It came from Sal. It's a required ordinance by the state, and it's modeled pretty much after the model ordinance that the state has provided with some minor tweaking to make it fit our code.
Are there any questions or discussion items from members of the board? Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
Do we have a roll call vote, please?
I need to get some hotkeys going on this. Thank you. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So ordinance 2012-04 passed upon introduction. We have a second ordinance this evening for introduction. This is ordinance 2012-05, an ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits to establish a cap bank pursuant to NJSA Title 40A, Chapter 4-45.14.
For the benefit of members of the public, could the village administrator please just give a brief summary of what this is?
Certainly. This is an ordinance that, under the statutes applicable, there's an appropriations cap whereby our appropriations, subject to certain adjustments for exempt categories, debt service, et cetera, are limited to an increase of 2.5% per year. Quite frankly, that cap has largely, although not officially, been withdrawn. It's essentially obsolete in light of the tax levy cap, which is a separate cap, which almost makes this kind of a moot point. But nevertheless, one of the options that you have, which I believe they have provided as originally provided as an incentive so that you wouldn't feel compelled to every year take your 2.5% increase, is that they allow you to bank cap room. By if you don't go up to the cap, you can bank that, and you can exceed. You can authorize up to 3.5% and then bank that cap, which is then you have a 2-year rolling balance. Presumably gives you cap bank in the event of a rainy day down the road. This year, it's I think prudent to do it. It kind of builds in that safety net in the future. Again, in light of the levy cap, it will literally never be applicable, but nevertheless, since it's still in the books, I recommend doing it. I will tell you this, and we'll discuss later on, the budget that I anticipate presenting together with the village president to the trustees at our next meeting is not even remotely close. We don't need the cap, and in fact, this year our appropriations will be approximately $1.1 million less than last year, so we'll actually be well below the cap and some $2 million below what it could have been under the appropriations cap. So just to be clear, even though it says on its face you're authorizing this is just purely to create this bank in the event of some future calamity. It has no bearing on this budget, and as will be revealed when we introduce the budget is actually substantially below last year.
Thank you.
What's the short answer?
Are there any questions from members of the board? Okay, is there a motion?
I move.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So ordinance 2012-05 passed upon introduction.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Pardon me?
Set him down.
Would you like to read
I'm
the-
sorry. I was distracted. I move that ordinance 2012-01 be set down for second reading and final passage at the April 23rd, 2012 meeting of the Board of Trustees, and that a public hearing be held at that time, and that the village clerk be authorized to take the necessary action regarding public notice of such hearing.
Yeah, I think you said
You-
2012-01.
You got to get the other one.
And there's two.
Then that might have been my typographical mistake. It's
It is.
Ordinance 2012-04 and 05.
Yes.
I second with both
Correct.
ordinances.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, we already did our public comment period this evening, and now we're moving on to our reports. And this is something that Trustee Rosner suggested in our last meeting, I believe, that we thought would be a good idea to introduce back very brief committee reports and a report from the village president and village administrator, which was something that we did in our conference agenda, which we no longer use. My report, very brief, 2 things that I wanted to mention. One, which I emailed to the board earlier, which is that I went to a seminar with the League of Municipalities this weekend, and just wanted to report to the board and to the public that it was very interesting. Got to meet other mayors and council presidents and some clerks and I guess Bill Kearns, an attorney with the League of Municipalities, and a number of other experts in municipal government. We talked about local finance, 2% cap, running meetings, agenda processes, Open Public Meetings Act, Open Public Records Act, which are both being discussed in the legislature right now. It was pretty interesting. I'm going to be working with our clerk and our administrator to take some of the suggestions that some of the clerks had from other towns. They appreciated some of the things that we did here. We all kind of learned from each other a little bit. And we'll be moving forward with updating the agenda process and some other of those procedures as we go forward, and make sure to notify everybody about that before we do so. Also just wanted to make a note that I met with some of the athletic directors from Seton Hall today and had a very nice meeting. There were discussions about uses of recreational facilities between the village and Seton Hall, and it was nice to meet some more people at Seton Hall who are interested in learning about what's happening in town and making sure that everything they do they can bring down to the village for us as soon as possible, so that we're all on the same page. That's it.
Thank you. And also, I don't know what the past practice, this is also a spot on the agenda that I had requested in the past. I've always had, and it's an opportunity, I think, for me to kind of give a quick update. One, on the budget status, I had originally, I think at our workshop, perhaps overly optimistically hoped to introduce tonight. Probably could have done that, but it wouldn't have been very tight. The annual financial statement was not completed at the time I thought it was going to be completed, and in fact I didn't get it till last Thursday, so I didn't want to rush this, but the budget is essentially complete. It is very consistent with what I represented at the workshop. I will have that to all of you early, probably in the next day or two, so we'll have ample time to review it, and the Finance Committee is scheduled to meet next week, and we can review it at that time as well, with a plan to introduce it at the April 9th meeting. Did want to announce that...
Barry, I'm sorry, do you have a number yet? Even at our budget workshop, you said it was around 2%?
It's, as I proposed it, it's less than 2% overall. The tax levy cap calculation is actually a negative number, a negative percentage. I'm at 1.94 overall. But I will, it's got all the details, and I break down the rate, and I adjust the rate from last year because of the reassessment, and adjust the increase on the average assessed home. So I will get that all to you in the next day or two, and then, as I said, we can discuss it at the Finance Committee, and if necessary, more detail on the 9th.
I have a question regarding the budget. We had a group here from the Coalition on Race, and my question is, are any changes with the 3 nonprofits, not talking about SOPAC, consistent with 211, or have we made any reductions?
That's one of the things that I will be communicating with you, because this sort of came to light, and as you know, I was not here at last year's discussion of nonprofits and service agreements and things of that nature, so I will be soliciting all that. I budgeted consistent with last year at this point.
I just want to make it clear that any fiscally cutbacks or changes we make, I'm only going to support it if we're consistent across all nonprofits, and that we don't selectively, keep some the same and reduce the others. That's my position, so I want everybody to know that ahead of time, that I'm not going to support anything only if it's consistent.
And Deborah, that's consistent with what you said last summer as well, but just to be clear, we did discuss this and agree upon last summer that we would provide space in lieu of funding. That was the consensus at the time.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you can save the discussion on the budget to when the budget is introduced, then we can allow the administrator to continue with his report. I would appreciate that.
That's fair.
Thank you.
I did want to announce, it was announced, I think, on Friday by the State of New Jersey Department of Transportation, the local aid, municipal aid grants, and the village was awarded $230,000 DOT grant for the Terrell Road project. I'd like to recognize and thank our engineer, Sal Renda, at Gulius and his office in Jeddah for all their hard work in putting that together. Also, we got our first official notice of award or reimbursement for FEMA expenses. This one is limited to the debris removal, and our reimbursement of our 75% is $178,000 and change, which is significant.
Wow,
and we
that
still
is.
have a number of others, both for forced labor and equipment, as well as Hurricane Irene, still pending, that look very favorable. So I'd like to recognize all the department heads and staff that were very involved. Those are pretty intensive applications and all the detail, and recognize all those. And then lastly, just to give you a heads up, and I think I may have mentioned this at the last meeting, we will be finalizing a standardized format for departmental reports. You can expect to get those in April. There'll be the March monthly reports from all the departments, and we'll get on that program as well. So those were the only items I wanted to highlight today. Thanks.
Thank you. Finance IT Committee?
Yeah, I have had a conversation with the village administrator about frustration I've had in obtaining consistency in financial reporting. And the response of the administrator is that he's putting together a service level agreement or service level statement of what the needs are for our financial reporting and a measure of how well we perform against that. There have been a number of documents that we are still pending and missing from our reporting.
Thank you. Planning and zoning? Oh, one more.
Planning and zoning.
From the IT side, we're having a meeting with Seton Hall this coming Thursday to talk about our configuration, our networking, and some of the plans that we want to do with using our servers in a new location. So they're going to do some due diligent review and helping us out in that area. They're very technically competent in that area.
Thank you.
Planning and zoning met last week, and we have two things I wanted to bring to the board. One was the speed humps, which are being proposed for Mayhew and Harding Drive. A series of speed humps that was discussed with residents at the Public Safety Committee. I think you had two meetings where you discussed it, maybe one meeting plus an email that went around to the residents and the group. And overall response was favorable. There's the usual negatives or cons against speed humps, such as, rescue squad response could be increased by a minute or two, as could fire squad, and snow plowing is an issue, but the majority of the people seem to be in favor of them. There is a budget cost to it, which was about $25,000, I think you said? Yeah. About $25,000, which I said is not in this year's budget, so it would be in next year's if the board wants to move forward with that.
Or is that for the whole project or per hump?
No, that's the whole project.
My only concern is from the fire chief. Will that create a liability for homeowners there, because it really...
I don't think the fire department was the less of the concern, I think, than the winter snow plowing, if we ever have a winter again, of course, it's heavy.
Really? I just got a bigger...
And the second one was the rescue squad, I think, because of the equipment they had with going over the humps, they had to slow down much more dramatically than the fire trucks seemed to go over them much easier.
Yeah, I could say just real quick to that is that, coming up to each one of those, you basically have to stop, at least with an ambulance. And I think the fire trucks are a little different because they can kind of get up on the curbs and go around things. The ambulance can't really do that.
Mm-hmm.
The real problem, I don't have any statistical data about how much it slows it down. I mean, it exists. It may be very minor, although in emergency services, minor usually is not acceptable. The real problem is on streets where there's 12 speed bumps over like a half-mile block, and when you get up to the speed bump and you slow down, you can't speed back up. You have to slow down and stop again, and you have to keep doing that. So there are some streets, around here, not many in South Orange, that are pretty much totally avoided by fire and EMS because they know that the whole street is speed bumps.
Mhm.
So if it's one on one end and one on the other, you know, or if it's 2 or 3, it's not as big of a deal. But if there's 12 over the same, I mean, that's much more important. And I know that's not what we're talking about.
This is more or less, this is, you know, there's 4 on each of the streets and 2 on a block. It's not nearly as dramatic. I know I went down, I think it's, I forgot what street it is in Montclair. I want to say Valley Road. There's like, it seems like there's like 20 of them on one half-mile stretch. But that's something that we have to discuss, and it's something that's, you know, and the budget, if the full board wants to do it. But the Public Safety Committee did overall recommend it. Planning and Zoning did not object to it. So it's up to the rest, but it's something for the administrator to understand that the desire is to have in the budget. The second thing was the Fairview Avenue lighting. We looked at that road is scheduled to be repaired yet this year with money from last year, and the last outstanding item was the lights. We wanted to put more lighting on that street, and we looked at electric versus gas and what the cost would be, and it's overwhelmingly less expensive in the future years to have electric lights. There is a cost in the first, in the installation of the electric lights. It would take about 3.5 years, slightly less than 3.5 years, depending on which method we went with, to recoup that cost. And in the future years, depending on how we pay for that installation, the savings was, I say $11,000 a year or $14,000. It was $11,000 a year going forward. So it was a fairly substantial number for the lights. And because of the width of that street, it also would provide much better lighting on that street. And it's something that I think that we have to, you know, think about every street that we do now, about whether it's worth it to go to electric. And I know there's a certain charm to the gas and so forth, but there is a price that we pay on that.
2 points, Mark, just to clarify. Number one, so people are listening, we're not talking Cobra headlights. These are, they're like the lights.
Similar to what we have in the downtown.
Just for people to understand the clarity. So visually, aesthetically, they're similar.
They look like the gas lights.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, but they look like them. The other point, I think we wanted to confirm with the administrator as to whether or not we have money this year to purchase that initial installation, because the work is scheduled to occur this year. The funding for the road work was put in the budget last year, but I don't know if the funding for the additional purchase of the upfront capital cost for the lighting was in there. And I don't know if Sal followed up with you, or if you know off the top of your head.
But I can check with what was the total?
Was it 180?
No, it's less than that.
I think it said like 100,000.
Oh, it was 100,000 more. It was $100,000 more than the extra gas.
No, I think it was total.
No, I think the total's.
I think the gas was 60, electric was 100, or some, the delta was.
It's 60 and, you're right.
Something like that.
100,000, okay. So we can send you the
They don't know.
spreadsheet.
In other
How we
words,
can send
check
you the
with Hal,
spreadsheet.
they don't know.
How we did a spreadsheet analysis, which.
Yeah, but that is something that needs to occur this year.
Yeah. So Sal needs an answer on that yesterday.
Okay.
I think that everything else can be read in the minutes if they're passed around to the full board. There's nothing else that we needed action on right away.
Did you consider the impervious surface ordinance yet?
Actually, we didn't have a copy of it. It wasn't distributed to us. I mean, I should say that we did this, we did this like 4 or 5 years ago when the Environmental Commission
And you
first.
did it a year ago, too, because I sent you the date that you
But we didn't do it at
considered
Planning and Zoning a year ago. It could go back more than a year ago, but it was,
I
but
thought
we
it
didn't.
was in January.
But we didn't have a copy, and one of the members was missing, so we did put it off, but I, you know.
So next meeting?
And actually, Sal was supposed to ask you if you had a copy of that ordinance, if you could forward it to me.
Okay, I'll make sure that you get the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Public Safety Committee?
Yeah, just a few quick items, a lot of which we've already talked about. We talked about the purchase of the bid for the aerial ladder truck, which I believe we were going to have a resolution tonight, but that's been pushed off. I assume we'll have that at the next meeting. Right. So for the new ladder truck, which we have the grant for the majority of, that will be on our next meeting. We talked about the red light cameras, which again, we saw the presentation earlier. Intersection of South Ridgewood and South Orange Avenue, a resident made the suggestion that there be turn arrows on the Ridgewood side, and Deborah will talk about it again at the next public safety meeting, because we need to follow up with the county on that, take a look further. The police best practices study is getting underway, and we're tracking that. That's really it. One other thing worth noting, Citizens Public Safety Committee gave their report. You didn't have that in your announcements, did you? That their, Citizens Public Safety Committee is starting a toy drive for the domestic violence response team. And starting, I believe it's April 1st, Robin, they can drop them off here in the
clerk's
Village Hall.
office.
So it's for people who are victims of domestic violence that come into the police headquarters with their children. There's something for the children to utilize and possibly even take home with them while they're dealing with that crisis.
So this would be a continuous contribution, because the expectations are that if the kids want the toys that they've been playing with, they'll be allowed to take them with them. So we need a pipeline to continually replenish.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people who expressed interest. I think we're going to be overwhelmed initially, so I think we'll be able to fill that pipeline for a while, but you're right, we're going to want to do that periodically.
If someone wants to donate, what's the best way for them to do that?
The Hilliard Village Hall, the clerk, Robin said she would have a place for people to drop things off. Is that right?
Yep, bring them right into the village clerk's office.
Okay.
That
I know
easy.
if there's overflow, the rescue squad keeps toys in the ambulances for the kids on the way to the hospital too. It's always something.
And next public safety meeting is this Thursday, 7:30 here in Village Hall, for anyone who wants to attend.
Thank you. Legal and Personnel Committee?
Just a couple of things. One, we really are looking at developing a little more clarity to a performance evaluation for unclassified employees so that the administrator can review it, give any input, and craft it, because he is the COO of the organization, and then present it to the full board for input and review, so that it would be fair, and we want to get this done quickly, so that clear expectations could be set up. And basically what the intentions is to make this a component of it is to reward people for exceeding expectations, and that's really what I think the goal of this is. And I think it's important to say it that way. It's not a punitive program we're coming up with, but it's a one to clearly state and recognize the job descriptions in your area, and then motivate people to not only meet but exceed expectations. And we have, in my opinion, a great team here to begin with. And the other thing that we talked about, but I don't think we clearly understood the charge given to the Legal and Personnel Committee, was with changing, moving the school board elections to November. What is the desire, or how would that affect the Board of Estimate? Because we're this unique system with the partnership with Maplewood that we kind of fall outside the bill. Board of Estimates automatically going away, and there's some...
Only if it doesn't exceed the cap. It doesn't go away, right? Just be clear.
All right, thank you for the clarity. So we really need to look at that and get some feedback and expectations from the Board of Trustees of how they feel about what form the Board of Estimates should look like. And once we have that clarity, then we need to go to our representatives and say, since we're a unique school district, this is what we really want the change to look like in regards to moving the election to November.
Holidays.
Pardon me?
Holidays.
Oh, yeah. Trustee Levison asked me to give him a list of the holidays that were normally enjoyed by the corporate world, and I gave him a list, and they're pretty much 8 holidays. They're New Year's Day, President's Holiday,
Memorial Day,
4th of July, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then there was one floating holiday. For example, in my world, January, you had a choice of either taking Martin Luther King's holiday or the President's Day. So there was about 8 holidays. And here in South Orange, there are 14 holidays. 15? 15 holidays. So,
Depends.
15.
Depends on which union. Yeah.
And so I'm going to tag team with you. So once I gave you that information, what is,
Our intent is to move from the 15, which is a fairly high count, to a more normalized level. And what we're looking at are the non-contractuals to start with, setting up a new holiday schedule plan, and then moving that forward into our negotiations.
And Howard, for what it's worth, I spoke to one of our colleagues in Maplewood, as I'm sure you have as well. From what I understand, they did this a number of years ago and moved, again, I think they have the standard holidays and have a handful of floaters to address things like Martin Luther King or Election Day or Columbus Day, something that is of significance to that person, but it's still not 15.
Yeah, and I spoke to people at Summit as well, to the mayor in Summit.
and the rest of the agenda, I'm not going to share because there's no real action to discuss at this time.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on something that Deborah said, that, Steve, you were going to put together a memo?
We're
Where
very
might that be?
close. We're very close. We just discovered a marvelous book that goes back and traces the entire history of the board. I'll share a copy with all of you. We're putting it, it's so far beyond the copyright date, it's unbelievable. We'll share an e-copy with
Okay, what are
all
you
of
talking about?
Pardon?
What are you talking
I had asked for a memo about 6-7 months
Yeah,
ago
it-
regarding the
Yeah.
Board of School estimate and also the funding
The whole
formula.
history.
for the
Oh,
Board of
okay.
Ed,
history.
The whole Board of
And-
Ed,
and-
what we might be able to do
Yeah.
or not do.
And we're beginning to shed some light on why we are the only board that has that unique form as a result of this resource. It's kind of interesting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Public Works?
Public Works is moving along swimmingly in terms of getting rid of all the excess wood chipped from the down trees and branches. Single stream moving forward. We had a report, actually at the last Board of Trustees meeting, I think we had just received the minutes that day or the day before. And we haven't had another meeting yet because we're having a meeting. We're moving our meetings to the last week of the month rather than the, whatever it was before. And we have been having for about the last 3 months now regular reports from Sal as to the progress on Village Hall and/or moving. And I noticed that that was one of the things on the agenda, so that was really the only thing I wanted to address, because my understanding was that the board had delegated, at least to the Public Works Committee, for sort of overview and progress, the job of dealing with Village Hall renovation issues. If you want to not do that and have an ad hoc committee, then we should discuss that, but I'm not exactly sure what Trustee Rosner had in mind under discussion item number 1. But we have been doing that, just so you know, but I know you're not on our committee.
Thank you. Recreation and Cultural Affairs.
We have 2 items on the consent agenda, which y'all can ask questions about if you want to pull those out. One item I want to talk about is we've been working for a number of months now on regulations for the parks, and to follow the clarification of the regulation of the parks is the signage for the parks. I know we talked about permanent signage a while ago. We're waiting for 2 issues: the name of the town, because we didn't know what that was going to be, and also to have some clarity in the regulations. Steve's firm's been going through them, and I'm wondering if you can update us on where that might be.
Yeah, the ball's in my court right now. What happened was an
pun
associate,
intended, of course.
An associate who had right, no pun intended.
Oh, you're so witty.
The ordinances have been revised by this associate who's left us now and sent to Kate for comment. She's commented. The ordinance is back. It's been back for a while, and I need to address her comments.
Okay, when might you do that by?
Shortly. I'll get to it. I'll get to it by the next meeting. We'll have it turned around.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Is that?
That would be,
Okay,
yes.
great. So we have a couple discussion items tonight before we move to our consent agenda. The first is establishing an oversight committee on the Village Hall renovation. Trustee Rosner, this is something I believe that you had asked for, to create a small committee to help oversee this.
Yeah, unless one committee's taken over, but I thought we should have a committee to be working on this and following up on the various phases of the project to make sure that someone's staying on top of it and there's communications to the board and so forth and so on.
I think no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think if we have the administrator, the engineer, and maybe one trustee or two trustees, a small work group. Committee sounds a little too much. I mean, this isn't a policy. This is just work being done. Granted, it's a large project.
But I do agree it should stay small.
Yeah, and anything more than that, then they would have to be notice meetings, and that just seems extravagant for checking up on the renovations of the building. So,
And the project manager.
and the project manager, that's right. That's a good point.
And the project manager.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to volunteer anybody, though I think, that Trustee Gould has some experience in this field.
Yeah, I think she would
So
be
would like,
good.
I'd like to see her participate in that.
So you've been recruited.
But not that I want to volunteer anybody, and I don't know who else could do it. I'm not here in daytime, so I think most of these meetings
And
are going to be in
Janine is Chair of
daytime.
Public Works, if she's so
Yeah,
inclined.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I would like to do it very much, but they'd
You've
have to
been
be-
recruited.
They'd have to be like 8:30 meetings or something like that.
Okay, we can try it if it doesn't work. Figures, but
Construction normally meets very early in the morning for their coordination meetings.
that's
Right,
true. All
exactly.
right. Okay, so we'll kind of create an informal work group, and maybe during the administrator's report back in each meeting, you can brief the board on if that group had met, and if they discussed anything of significance. Okay.
Now, on the employee side, we already have a small work group, and that's for the restructuring of the staff, and we've met, and that's Howard, you, and Barry and myself. And we've had a couple of meetings, on that. Regan started the process. We had a couple of meetings with Regan, and so we've already made a little headway, and Barry is in the process of, digesting that information, and then with our next meeting that we schedule, we'll continually move that forward, and then we can report on the progress of that.
Okay, and I know there were some pieces that were kind of between the two as far as where staff would be in the interior layout of the building. The administrator being part of both those groups, I think, make sure that we're on the same page there. The next discussion item, an amendment to the satellite antenna ordinance.
I mean, we have one.
That is a matter that was brought to our attention by a resident indicating that our ordinance might in fact be in violation of federal law. And when we took a look at it, indeed, the resident was correct, that satellite antenna that are not larger than 1 meter in diameter or on a mast taller than 12 feet are protected. There is certain wiggle room where you can engage in some regulation, but not a lot of it. And the ordinance that I have drafted and circulated addresses the issue by creating a new definition of protected, federally protected satellite antennas, which can only be regulated in some very limited ways. And the way we limited that regulation was that it can't be placed in the front yard of a structure unless there's no other practical place to put it. And then we regulated the placement on historic properties. The federal regulations permit us to regulate on federally designated historic sites and properties where they can be placed, and we indicated that if it's the only practicable place to place it, being visible from the street, that you could do it under those circumstances.
What does practical mean?
There's no signal that can be, decent signal that can be achieved except by placing it in that fashion.
Well, how big is a meter? I don't know.
3 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I think when the ordinance was originally written, the one that's no longer conforming, that was, I assume, conforming at that time, or met some...
Yes, it was, and we left it, other than those antenna, we left it in place, because of course there are people who are ham operators who might want to put up a 50-foot tall tower in their backyard, or other types of antenna that are larger than a meter in diameter. And for that reason, we left all of that ordinance still in place.
And from ordinances like this, with technology that changes every few years, the likelihood is that these ordinances will have to be modified again.
Probably.
Hey, Village Council, were you planning on having us introduce this at our next meeting? Is that the schedule?
If that meets with everyone's approval, I would like to see it moved then, yes.
Are there any further questions tonight about it? Obviously, if people have questions in the interim, they can always email you or call you and ask as well.
Thank you.
Okay. The next discussion item is the vacant storefront ordinance. I know we discussed this last time and asked for some changes to add some temporary language.
Yes, village administrator suggested that in a whereas clause, we include some language that says this is simply an interim measure awaiting the formation of the Special Improvement District Corporation to take action.
Do you have it in front of you? Just could we read it just for public benefit, the one sentence that we added?
Yep. Whereas the Board of Trustees wishes to provide for alternative means to cover store windows pending a more comprehensive solution which may be proposed by the District Management Corporation of the Special Improvement District.
Okay.
Steve, the one comment, and I sent you this in email, I'm wondering if it's worth talking about for 1 second. It references, we all agree this is a temporary measure until the SID is in place, but the ordinance says the design, in lieu of black seamless paper, the Design Committee of Main Street may be consulted. But it's sort of contradictory because if the SID exists, the Design Committee of Main Street won't exist, so it's sort of, so I'm almost thinking maybe it should say the Design Committee of Main Street and or the Special Improvement District. Your reference, because you're referencing an entity that won't exist in a very short period of time.
I had anticipated we'd amend the ordinance at the point in time that the corporation made a recommendation to you. After all, they're going to make that recommendation.
Well, I think he's indicating there might be an interim provision where the SID gets formed, so therefore the design committee's not there, but they're obviously, the SID's not going to have it on day one.
That's right.
It may take them a few months.
Fine.
It's a fair point.
We can put that in there.
Are there any other questions about this?
No.
Okay, could we have that prepared for our next meeting for introduction with that language change?
Sure.
Great, thank you. We have a number of resolutions on our consent agenda this evening. The village clerk, please read them by title.
Yes, thank you. We have a resolution hiring teachers for the 2012 spring classes at the Baird Community Center and the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution terminating the administration consulting services agreement with John Gross. A resolution appointing representatives to the Suburban Essex Joint Insurance Fund. A resolution awarding a contract to Infosys Fire Systems. They do business as Emergency Software Products for a one-year software maintenance renewal agreement for calendar year 2012 in the amount of $1,215. A resolution awarding a contract to the South Mountain YMCA for basketball program collaboration services for the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs in the amount not to exceed $15,700. A resolution awarding a contract to D'Onofrio & Son for alternate bid numbers 1 through 5 listed in the bid specifications for the mowing of large turf areas within the Township of South Orange Village in the amount of $48,105.75. A resolution awarding a contract to Greenscape Landscape for the mowing of large turf areas within the Township of South Orange Village in the amount of $28,187.37. A resolution awarding a contract to Giordano Company for single-stream recycling collection and disposal services for the period July 1st, 2012 through December 31st, 2012, and with the option to renew for the 2013 calendar year in the amount not to exceed $9,444 per month. A resolution authorizing an award of contract to Stoney's to provide the food concession operation at the Peter Connor Memorial Swimming Pool for calendar year 2012. A resolution awarding a professional service contract to Joseph Bauman Esquire of McManaman and Scotland Law Offices to serve as special counsel for redevelopment. A resolution approving raffle license application number 1218 to the Youth Orchestras of Essex County. There is a temporary budget resolution for calendar year 2012, and a resolution approving a participation with the state of New Jersey in a Safe and Secure Communities program administered by the Division of Criminal Justice, Department of Law and Public Safety. And we also have a resolution authorizing an executive session at the end of tonight's meeting.
And the items for our executive session this evening are OPEIU collective bargaining, PBA collective bargaining, affordable housing set aside for Bifus site, review of village administrator, and I'd like to add one more contract matter in, which is EMS dispatching.
And I believe council wanted to have East Orange Water. In your memo said there were other issues you wanted to discuss in addition to your written update, is that right?
Well, I was responding to Trustee Bauer's request.
Well, I was responding to Mr. Rother's statement that the BOT had not agreed to hire a consultant to advise us so that we could figure out what we were doing by the August 1st deadline or not. I thought we had agreed upon that, and therefore we just need to clarify that.
Okay, so we'll have that as well. I had one question on this consent agenda. I'm not sure maybe if one of the board members can speak to this a little bit. The professional services contract for redevelopment council. Did we have a dollar value that we were putting to that?
You mean a not to exceed amount?
Or even just kind of a project plan? You know, how many hours we were expecting this person to?
And I kind of raised that issue for budgeting purposes.
We'd actually put a number in last year's budget when we had done it, before we pulled it out. We put a number in there, which of course I don't remember exactly, but
45,000.
45? Yeah. I remembered 40,000, maybe it was 45,000, but it was in that ballpark last year that we talked about, based on a number of hours that we thought would be needed for the 3 or 4 things that we were going to need them on, and not to exceed that number, and then we pulled it out and we went to budget reduction. But for some reason, okay, you say 45, I said 40.
That seems like a lot of money for that.
But when I'm looking at the of the projects that we wanted them to be working on in the next 6 months, the balance of this year, Third Valley, Bifus, and Sterling, leftover pilot agreements and reviews, and maybe a couple other minor issues. It didn't seem like that would be unreasonable that the 40,000 shouldn't cover all that.
That seems like an awful lot to me.
But I thought that part of that was that we would be asking the developer to pay for some of that fee.
Yeah, if it's possible. I mean, that's...
I think we need to work out a scope.
And I think...
I would agree with that. Even if we have a general idea, it just seems like, considering the substantial expense to who we're talking to versus our council now, it just seems like having some estimated number of hours to those projects and a timeline might make sense before we get started.
Yeah.
I don't know if other folks agree.
I agree.
And again, it's hourly, so he doesn't work until we give him work. So you could appoint him.
So do you want to pull this resolution?
You actually give him.
Yeah. I'd like to, pending just getting some.
The only concern I have with pulling this resolution and putting it off again is that we do have a meeting set up on Third and Valley, and we're trying to get moving forward.
But you
with
didn't
that.
hear Barry. Barry said we can appoint.
You could do I mean, he only does work when we give him the work.
Right.
So we
Okay.
can control what we
Appoint it.
spend, but at some point, sooner than later, I need to have
Right.
some
Okay.
relatively firm
So we can
idea
go
of what
ahead
we're
and
talking
appoint him,
about.
but we control
Sure,
his expense.
Yeah.
As long as you're okay with
Yeah,
that for the
I'm comfortable.
budget.
You can appoint him,
Okay.
and then, you can only give him as much work until you figure out exactly how much you want to spend.
But can we?
And we control how many hours. The state doesn't just go.
But let's not play that by ear. I mean, if we're to do this because of the timing issues tonight, let's, this week, figure out, a scope for this.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
I just have one other question or comment with respect to 069 for single stream recycling. Just a follow-up to our discussion that we had last time, and I just want to make sure these things are factored in. Some of the issues or, I guess, questions we raised last time were about aesthetics and making sure those are maintained by requiring that people still use toters. We don't care, if it's a blue toter or a green toter, but people should still use toters. Cardboard should be flattened or bundled or tied or somehow managed. And so I think, I don't know how we codify that. Does that go in the contract, or how do we communicate that to?
I thought we were going to do a separate resolution for us. I don't think it was in the contract.
Yeah, and I don't think it needs to be in the contract.
It doesn't
The
need-
city just does
right.
whatever we do, but internally, we certainly got to come up with our own regulations, rules, and then communicate them to the public.
Yeah.
And whether that's DPW committee, who seems to have been the one with the lead on this. Certainly
I don't want there to be any misimpression, though. We told the vendor by way of the RFP that it had to be in a container. We didn't specify a toter.
Right, but we discussed it last time. We all agreed that there's reason we have toters. There's a reason we have rear yard pickup. So we wanted to maintain that. I think we all discussed that last
Well,
time.
we said that the vendor had to have capability of his compactors to pick up a toter, but not necessarily that it be a toter only.
But what other kind of container you want to just have?
Well, like the Essex, the green,
I think.
But it sounds like there's two pieces. One is, can the vendor pick up with a toter? And it sounds like they can, because that was in the
Yes.
contract.
That's
The other
just
is
doesn't-
is what we, as the village, require people
Yes.
put out. So we don't have to put that in the contract. We can specify, I don't know if it would be by ordinance or otherwise, we could specify.
I think it would just be a
that-
resolution.
Right, that it was still required, but the pieces are separate. One has already been done, and then the other one is up to us, which I'm assuming we could do at any point.
I would definitely be opposed to requiring toters unless we're going to do away with the $75 fee, because that is going to tamp down the increase in recycling that we want this to encourage. The purpose of this is to increase recycling. And I think any kind of container is sufficient because it's going to contain the recyclables, and it doesn't have to be the toter.
I think that's too vague, any type of container. Someone could take a cardboard box and just fill it with bottles then. I need something more
I
definable.
don't have the RFP in front of me, but it definitely does not allow.
No, we already agreed that the RFP is okay, but the question is, from our point of view, did we want to have something for the aesthetics? And we talked about just allowing the toter carts, because most homes have a toter cart already.
Only half the homes in South Orange have toters.
And
Well,
a blue or a green one, you're saying only half the
more
homes?
than half.
Look,
What?
toters are fine with me if we make them available.
Well, I don't see how you can not charge people who, after you've made people pay all these years, now you're saying.
Subsidize it, that's how we do it.
well, we've gone out and we've gotten a bid for a cheaper price. It's around $50 now.
I would
If we
still
buy them
say
in quantity.
anything over 25 is just going to be,
But again, like we talked about, I think there's people that have blue and green toters that may not need both of them. And so then there will be a surplus of toters. Some people have a lot of cardboard, will need two. But I think a lot of people will only need one now.
Well, I think the comment about if you have large cardboard, that you can leave it on the side of the toter, instead of cutting it up and putting it into the toter. And some of those things are going to have to be worked out as we, move forward with the recycling. But we just don't want to make a garbage dump in front of the house.
Exactly.
We have cardboard boxes with,
I don't think this is going to impact the number of people who recycle.
Yeah.
I think the fee, it's a one-time fee. I don't see it as but if you want to subsidize it, then come back with a plan for subsidizing it. I think we should try and keep the uniform look like we've always had.
I strongly disagree with you. I'm not planning to put my recyclables out in the toter. I think the toter is useless. It's off kilter. It's improperly weighted. I certainly don't think it's attractive.
I don't know what you mean by it's
And I
improper.
don't.
Is anyone familiar with what other towns that use single stream do? Where,
Yes.
I mean, are there guidelines that could be in place rather than specific requirements of like one type of product.
But I mean, also keep in mind, we're in the few towns that has rear yard pickup. It's by design. A lot of towns, people just put anything by the curb, and aesthetics isn't as elemental to the town. And here, it's just been something that's been of importance to the residents.
I know.
In other towns, like, I mean, I had single stream recycling in the town that I lived at. I've lived here for 20 years now, so I don't even know how many years. I must have had single stream for 10 years before that, so this is a long time ago. And there was an orange bucket issued free, by the way, by Mercer County to every single resident in Mercer County, and you just threw everything in the bucket. And there was nothing, untoward or unaesthetic about it. That was just it. You just put it in the,
But everyone used the same bucket, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Right, and that's exactly what we're saying. We're suggesting the exact same thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if I have an extra, plastic, garbage can, why can't I put that out on the street? Why do I have to buy another toter? I'm not going to buy another toter.
I thought the total number, when I heard it, was much higher than 50%. I heard it was closer to 70, but I don't know where you're getting 50
It's been
from.
reported to us for years at DPW that no more than 50% of the people have toters.
I thought it was 50% of people doing recycling, not 50% of people have toters.
No, I think it's higher than 50%.
But if we can come up with another type of container that's reasonable and not a toter, I don't really object to it. I don't want people just. We didn't want the stacks of newspapers tied around and the bottles in loose bags all over the place.
We disallowed bags. We said it has to be a rigid container, like a rigid plastic container.
Rigid plastic. I don't really see the. I think
Janine, they can hear you.
Plastic or metal container.
Rigid plastic or metal container is what the RFP said.
And that says residents are encouraged to use special 96-gallon toters.
Right.
That's in the RFP.
I think we should just leave it at that.
Well, it's a separate resolution and we can vote on it.
Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that issue has to be resolved.
That's what you
Pass
said.
this
No,
resolution.
yeah.
It's a separate resolution.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for consent agenda items?
I just want to be assured that we have funding for all of the resolutions that have been signed off on. Do we have certification of that? And the other one on Resolution 65, I would like, if we are going forward with IT resolutions, that we have the IT manager agree to or be party of that resolution, other than just the department head.
They didn't hear the last part.
Other than the department head, this one is from the fire chief. I think that both the fire chief and the IT manager should be making the recommendation.
Seems reasonable. Do you object to this going forward?
No, I don't
Okay.
object to it.
All right.
Well, I move.
Were there any other questions? If it pleases the clerk, I have a question. Can we do a roll call vote on this consent agenda? There's just a number of financial items, and especially with the single stream, I mean, that's a large contract. Those sort of things should be recorded by a roll call. Is that something?
You can absolutely call for a roll call.
Okay, let's do that pending a motion
We're
in a
doing
second.
these separate now?
You need a second.
You made a motion. Do we have a second?
Come on, Howie, second.
Oh, yes, second, but...
Okay.
Was that a second?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please? It's very timid.
Nothing timid about it.
Is this a roll call on the entire agenda?
On the consent agenda.
Entire agenda.
I thought you meant individually.
That's what I thought he meant.
No, I'm sorry. Just instead of one voice vote, just one roll call vote.
Just say all 6 names at once.
So
6 names at once.
So this is a roll call vote for the entire consent agenda consisting of resolutions 2012-62 through 2012-75.
Yes.
So with a motion and second, let me call the roll. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis-Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
So the consent agenda is passed upon roll call vote.
Thank
But
you.
I don't want to use those toters.
Is there any new business this evening?
Yes, I have something I'd like to discuss. I'll try to make it brief. I wanted to get back to the issue of the funding. I know you wanted the funding for not-for-profits. I know you wanted to wait till the budget meeting. But I had informed YouthNet after our last budget meeting and after speaking with two of my colleagues and talking to the village administrator that they were being funded at the level we had discussed over the summer. And YouthNet has made plans with this money. They've actually started to hire people to do development work for them because they do want to wean themselves off of our money. They understand that. But they've already started using the money that I had thought we had agreed to last summer and had not been taken out in the last budget meeting. They were going to have this money. I feel really uncomfortable waiting and have them wait in this purgatory for the next couple of weeks till we get back to them and tell them yay or nay. It may not even be 2 weeks from now. So I'd like to discuss their funding now, and I'm assuming that we're going ahead with their funding. This is what I understood from last summer.
Can we really not wait? Because I think one of the issues that's been brought up a couple times is making sure that it's a consistent discussion and that we're not picking out one group to discuss funding for, but all the nonprofits. So unless we're prepared to have that entire discussion tonight, which I know I'm not prepared for, I don't know if the administrator's prepared with the budget numbers.
We keep saying all the nonprofits, and it's like, there's two nonprofits that are really at play here. It's YouthNet and CCR. SOPAC is, SOPAC, that's...
Another issue.
Right, and correct, Main Street will no longer...
And Main Street, never mind whether it's going to no longer exist, we have a service level agreement with them in a contract that we signed. It's not, typical. And to Nancy's point, which I, discussed with her previously, was that YouthNet was something that was an offshoot of something that we started. We would have a program that we were going to do through rec. Maplewood had a similar type of program they wanted to do, and we put YouthNet together because it made more sense in terms of the budget and saved the town's money by doing it. We can go back to doing it separately and putting the programs through our budget and put it through the rec department and just add it to our budget and do away with the nonprofit if that's what people want to do. I don't see the point of it, but I'd rather keep it going. But we did agree last summer to fund YouthNet. They've been around 6 years now, 5 years? No, started after two.
Since we've been
Yeah,
here.
so 2008, I think, was the first year it funded. So it's been around for 4 years, and it's been somewhat successful. And I just don't know that one thing has anything to do with the other. If we want to have the discussion about the Community Coalition of Race again, I'm fine with that also. I don't think that we need to mix and match and the consistency that maybe you're looking for.
It's a perception of fairness.
This
And I think they're both great organizations. I think YouthNet is an incredible organization.
Let me finish. If you want to be fair about it, we could say that YouthNet's been around for 4 years and CCR's been around for 15 years. Now, I voted with you to continue some funding for CCR, but you can't put fair in this conversation because each thing has to stand on its own and should be discussed on its own. And I don't like the tying of one organization to another and saying, if we're cutting this, we're going to cut that. If we don't cut that, we don't cut that. I just don't see...
Because I remember our conversation
tit-for-tat
differently.
stuff.
If we were doing cutbacks because of the fiscal restraints, it's a want to, but a need that we can't imagine. I can support that. But my recall, and I'm saying this is my recall in discussions we've had, and we had several last year, is that we were going to get to the point where we were going to eliminate funding for all nonprofits.
I never agreed to that, but
that's what I recall. And as much as I think so highly of both organizations, they bring so much to the quality of life of the community. And then I see that we're going to fully fund one and then cut back our funding on the other. It's not what I understood, and the perception of fairness it is challenged, in my opinion. And unless we're consistent with the funding, I can't support doing one thing for one organization and one for the other. My recall was that we were going to do no funding for everything.
I think that was the goal. I think that was the goal to get there, but it's one step at a time. To Mark's point, YouthNet's only been around for 3 or 4 years, where CCR has been around for 15 plus years. So I think the goal is to get there. And the other point is we have made them a very, very, very generous offer to provide space in lieu of the funding, which you're aware of, which would essentially provide them essentially half of the monetary funding that they've received previously. Here we are in March, and they have yet to accept that offer. And had they done that, that would have, given them a considerable cost savings.
But that's half, but you're going to give YouthNet the full funding. You didn't reduce the funding for YouthNet.
Not-
So that's
not-
inconsistent.
Not this year.
Not
but
this year,
but
not for this year. But we had this, my frustration is we had this discussion last
The
summer.
decision was made.
And the decision was made. Then when the budget went through, there were no cuts in the budget, and I went to Barry, I know Barry knew, he didn't know the history of it. Is it cut? No, don't think so. Let me tell them they have their funding. And, and I offered to be their liaison, and now I have to backpedal with them? I feel really uncomfortable doing that. It's not fair to the organization. And I've already told them they're going to have the money based on my understanding of our meeting over the summer.
I absolutely agree with you, and I would understand your frustration. They're an incredible organization, but if we're going to fully fund them, then we should fully fund CCR. And if we offer them the space, fine, and then we give them the funding of the difference, so they're fully funded.
Do we want to do we want to vote on this again? I mean, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go back to them and say, we changed our mind, we don't know what's going on, there's no money for you. I don't feel comfortable doing that.
It's just a perception of fairness, and I'm adamant, I'm not going to support anything that's not consistent.
Can I just ask them, it's my recollection that we not only, we decided as a matter of policy, but that we told CCR at least, I only remember Diane coming to the podium during her regular report, but certainly CCR came to the budget meeting, and I thought we told them no more money.
As of January 1st this year, that's
my
correct.
understanding was that was because we were cutting all nonprofits.
Yes.
And so what meeting are you referring to last summer?
Over the summer, there was a
meeting?
budget meeting over the summer.
That was my understanding, exactly what you said. And now...
The only budget meetings over the summer
It was,
didn't relate to this year's budget.
it was July 18th.
What day of the week was that? Because I may not have been at that meeting, because it could have been on a Freeholder night meeting.
We said no more.
Haven't we
July
said
18th.
several times? Yeah.
No more.
July 18th
Howard
was a
is
Monday,
saying yes,
Deborah.
and
Yes.
you're saying yes, and I'm saying yes. And I
Yes.
had the exact same position that Deborah had. That is, if we're funding people, we're funding everybody. We're not
No
picking
more.
and choosing. But I thought we were very clear,
No,
and I
at
heard
that,
Deborah
at
say
that
this
meeting,
as well.
at that meeting, all of us agreed to continue funding to YouthNet. I don't remember if there was a cut or not.
No, I don't
And-
think
and
so.
I just
I
don't remember-
wasn't at that meeting.
And no, because you specifically talked about $6,250 for CCR plus the space, and I agreed to that. You and the other four voted no. And you were very specific, saying, gave your reasons why, and you said no to that $6,250, as did Michael, Nancy, and Howie. And we all agreed, and there was a majority that agreed to fund YouthNet and to continue Main Street until for the balance of this year. There was no all or nothing for all things. It's what you suggested, but it wasn't agreed to.
How come Howard?
Why would we
I've
fund
been
one
quoted as saying
organization 100%
nothing
and
is
cut
zero.
one 50%? Why
Look
would
at the
we do
minutes.
that?
I mean, it's there.
Robin, you haven't
Does
pulled
anybody
the
have
minutes, I'm
I
trying
have
to do
them,
it
I'm
too.
reading them right now. Yeah.
Do you want to read what the minutes say?
Which
Just
meeting?
so there's no...
I can send the excerpts for the minutes to the board, unless you
meeting?
want to
Yeah.
discuss it now.
Which meeting was it?
This is the July 18th budget workshop, and there was a lengthy conversation held.
Who was at that meeting?
It was a Monday night, Deborah, I believe you were
Okay.
there.
Okay.
I think
then-
everybody was there.
Okay.
I'm not looking
Attendance,
at the minutes, but it was a Monday.
we had full attendance, all
Okay.
members attended. And there was specific conversation and discussion about funding of Community Coalition on Race. It was agreed that the funding would be limited in calendar year 2011, and January 1st, 2012, there would be no funding. However, the board agreed to offer the office space, telephone, fax, and utilities.
Right.
Then there was discussion on the policy options for funding of the nonprofit organizations as a whole. The options discussed were significantly less funding, no funding, or providing funding with an engagement of a service level agreement. So there were three options. After that discussion, the board agreed that nonprofit organizations do provide needed services to the community. However, the village should not be relied on to fund the monetary contributions. The board further agreed that the village would provide funding in the 2011 budget only with an executed service level agreement. So there was no further discussion to carry that into 2012.
That's what I recall.
That's what I recall.
Yeah.
I recall differently. And I've certainly stuck to it, including at a cocktail party Saturday night.
And that's why I got a
I
panic-
told youth
I
net,
got a
no, you're not
panicked
getting
email.
any money, because I couldn't understand what Deborah was talking about 2 weeks or 4 weeks ago when she said, you know, you talked in the microphone, and when the CCR came up last time, it said, as long as it's across the board, and I was thinking, why isn't it across the board? We cut funding for everybody.
And you know, and what caused me concern was I get a call from a member of the CCR and said, I heard that YouthNet is getting full funding. I said, oh no, that's not true.
Yeah.
I said, they're not getting funding, and Main Street will disappear by be absorbed at the SID.
But we
I
have
said
a
the only
service
thing
level
that's not
agreement
going
with
away, I said, was SOPAC. I said, because we own that. And I said, but so, you know, what you heard wasn't true. Then I find out it's true.
We can vote on each one again. We
Well,
can vote on
I think-
CCR and
I think
Internet
part of the problem is because John left the money in the budget, and Barry may not have caught that, what we had said last year.
Yeah, Barry's just
Nor did I
walking
catch
into
it,
this.
apparently.
Yeah, but I recall that, so it's a
That's
perception of
the way
fairness.
to build reserves.
If we're gonna fund YouthNet, which it's a great organization, it's incredible, then we need to do the same as CCR.
What is the amount in the budget that YouthNet thinks they're getting, and or that you told them?
15,000, total 15,000, correct.
I would find it very strange that we would discontinue funding for an organization that we started. I mean, just, it would be bizarre to me.
I'm not sure that's the pertinent point. The point seems to be whether the South Orange taxpayers will fund nonprofits, whether through service level agreements or not. I don't think it matters whether we started or how long they've been here, or even what they do. Either we do it or we don't do it, and it should be.
It was to our advantage. I personally don't have an issue with funding certain nonprofits that provide benefits, direct benefits to the village. And, you know, we've always felt that Main Street and YouthNet, or whatever I felt that Main Street and YouthNet have provided a direct benefit to the village, and therefore I've been okay with funding on it.
And I feel that and that CCR
And
provides
CCR,
direct.
and CCR was another one which I felt the board had not, and I did not disagree that we shouldn't cut funding as quickly as I was okay with cutting the funding to them because they were at a very high number, and I thought we should cut them, and I thought Michael's proposal to them about space for a substantial portion of the funding was more than fair. So
I like that proposal too for space, but then, and
so we
make up the
talked about
difference
space
in
plus
funding.
6250, and I would still be okay with that. So, I mean, nothing's changed for me from that point.
Let me just make it simple.
So.
I would definitely feel Trustee Gould's frustration and all that other stuff that comes with it when an organization you've been communicating with because of what you believe was true, and now here we are going into April, and this organization is really compromised because they put their budget on it. I propose that we fund the 15,000 for YouthNet, and we do the space and the 62 for CCR for this year.
But Deborah, to that, we communicated, it was very deliberate when we had this conversation last July, because every time we have these budget conversations in the spring, everyone says, oh, well, we're too far into the year, we can't cut them now, it's too late. So we deliberately had this conversation last summer in advance of the year to give them 6 months notice to ramp up their fundraising. And we were very clear. John communicated, it was communicated multiple times through multiple venues.
And I was fine with that until I heard that the YouthNet was going to be fully funded. It's a perception of fairness. Either we stick consistently with what we had stated, which you state is right, or if we're going to fund YouthNet because of, misunderstanding of what was decided, then if we fund the YouthNet, I will only be fine with that if we fully fund CCR.
Nancy, do you know what the impact is to YouthNet without that funding?
It's devastating. It's devastating to them because they haven't ramped up their fundraising. I don't have the numbers on it and bring them with me, but they haven't ramped up to do development or any kind of private fundraising yet. So they're really, I don't know if it'll shut them down, but it would be really devastating to them. And it'll more than likely hit the programming that's at our middle school. There's a number of clubs they have.
It'll be programmed that we add back into a rec department again.
Yeah. But then we'll have to pay for it in the rec department. And the youth that does it better. But there's like, they have a number of clubs there that are free to kids that are in need. And
For
they're
for
probably
instance,
shut down.
we signed an agreement with the YMCA to do this program tonight, which same thing, when but I don't see this being any different, having an agreement with YouthNet and giving them $15,000. We have an agreement and we give them money. I just don't see it any different than that type of agreement. And,
And it's serving, as opposed to the courts, which, they have 15,000, and that's really with, as the police have pointed out, most of the people playing at the courts are from out of town. These are our kids that are programmed with youth. So, that's probably going to get a cut. I don't think they can afford to go on.
I understand Deborah's point, and I didn't realize, I never realized there was a full agreement like that. I remember Nancy and Michael did, but.
And unfortunately, the two I checked with were you two, and we both had the same understanding. I suppose I should have gone to the whole board, but I didn't think it was necessary. So.
I have to say, my personal opinion, considering the miscommunications, and I'm certainly not blaming any one person. I think we were all a little confused about exactly what was happening, perhaps. Although, let me rephrase that. We weren't confused,
I was not confused.
but we may not all have been correct. That this is, at the end of the day, a pretty small amount of money. Obviously, every dollar is important, but we spend as much as with both these organizations in, no offense to Village Council, maybe 2 or 3 weeks of legal fees. And this is funding a nonprofit, and when we're getting a good deal.
Very reasonable attorney.
Very reasonable legal fees, no less. Many less hours at the rate that our redevelopment council is looking for. Anyway, it's a small amount of money. There were miscommunications. I would see no problem with continuing the funding this year and deciding once and for all whether it's looking at all the other towns in Essex County and saying how many of them fund nonprofits through service level agreements, how many don't, and just making a policy decision. I very much feel this should not be based on one organization or another, but do the taxpayers in this town fund nonprofit organizations, whether through a service level agreement or not? That's the question that we have. It's not a question about how well organizations perform, because I think they both perform exceptionally. So I think that's a policy decision that this board has to make, and it's not.
We already made the policy decision.
We have not made a policy decision.
Yes,
We may
we
have
did.
discussed it in a budget workshop, but a policy decision is done by resolution or ordinance.
Okay.
We have not done that.
All right, we discussed what the policy should be, and that was to eliminate the funding. But since we're in this quagmire, for lack of a better way, this is my proposal, all right, is that we fund both these organizations for 2012 and make it clear that under no circumstances they should expect any funding in 2013. Or we don't fund anybody at all.
I'm with you on the latter. I'd say fund neither, because I think we've been down this road, a decision was made. I would just as well say, let's not fund either of them. And we gave them, let's be done. Let's get out of that business. We shouldn't be in that business.
Well, except for the Special Improvement District, SOPAC,
That's a different, that's totally.
the Rescue
that's
Squad,
totally- we don't give
through
money.
in-kind donations.
That's it. Okay, but then I could go through the list that we don't support. We don't support Achieve, or the adult school, or the.
All right, let me
there's
help
dozens of
Nancy out. Let me at least put it out there and we vote. Okay.
I think 2 organizations.
All right, can we take a vote, because I will support Nancy's, if CCR is supported, I will support that. So I will put it out there, and then we can vote it up or down.
I'd prefer for us not to take a vote this evening. This wasn't on the agenda.
Okay.
I'd rather have it listed on the agenda that goes out to the public first, and then vote on that in the next meeting.
All right, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
But anyway, Nancy, I would support that.
I'm uncomfortable waiting another couple of weeks with this, because I don't know what they're gonna do.
Well, it's.
They have very little funding, so.
Let me ask one more question, Nancy.
Yeah.
It's now the end of March, it's the end of the first quarter. If everyone's understanding was they were getting funding, shouldn't they have already gotten a payment this year? Shouldn't they have already gotten their first quarter funding?
Discussing the funding with Barry, and I don't know what.
Have they gotten any payments this year?
No.
No, not that I'm.
Usually we do it at the end of the quarter, they send the letters for contributions.
Didn't get anything in the first quarter at all? I think that's unusual. I think historically they get payment in each quarter.
Are both of these amounts in the budget right now?
As I've set it up, because I didn't know anything about this issue, nor did I never even heard of YouthNet when
So the
Nancy
budget-
called me, and I was operating on anything I don't know. stays in until I figure out what it is, or I didn't know anything about this discussion.
So his budget under the cap, these funds are already been allocated, they're included in his existing budget.
And at what levels?
No, but they're in the budget.
In the proposed budget.
The levels from last year.
Yeah.
But what was that?
22.5 and 15.
But I'm
But
fine
again,
with
that
voting
wasn't
on
my
this.
making
on
judgment
how-
call,
As a
not even knowing
policy
what
for
they were.
2012, I'm not sure I'm comfortable voting on anything for 2013 and beyond as a policy decision, because I think there are times when it's to the village's benefit to help fund a nonprofit. And I think Youth Net is a perfect example of that. I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm also not comfortable with tying every decision about future budgets up in this year to come to that resolution. I want to vote, if we're going to vote on it, I want to vote on this year's budget, for this year's budget alone, and not make conditions for next year.
But you're not, I think as the village president said, we're making a policy. It's not for next year, and we're not looking
Turn
at
your microphone.
for next year, we're looking at it for all years. In other words, are we adopting a policy? That policy may pass or it may fail, but we've certainly discussed it to death at this point. Everybody understands what their position is on it.
Okay.
Whether you look at it as a year-by-year basis or not, it's a policy question.
When if I could weigh in, and I'm new to this, I think there's too much emphasis in my sense on nonprofit, and the emphasis should be on, are they providing a service that's within the purview of the municipal function that you would otherwise provide. I mean, quite frankly, I think the First Occupational is a nonprofit who does the recycling. Nobody's viewing that as a donation to a nonprofit.
But they have a contract with us.
But they're providing a service. I mean,
But
if they
through a
happen to
contract.
be
Both these organizations-
But I mean, they happen to be a nonprofit, so
Yeah.
the fact that they're a nonprofit isn't, in my
You're
mind,
absolutely
the
right.
analysis is is it just an outright donation? Are you writing donation checks to every charity and
Right.
everything you think of, or are you getting some service that is within the normal
We
scope
did
of
make a
municipal
policy that
service?
we're not going to give any money to any organization unless there was a service level agreement.
Which both of these have presented us with.
And
Youth
we
Net
haven't,
and the
and we
Community
haven't
Coalition
agreed to.
We have service
And we
level
haven't
agreements for
agreed
both
to.
of them. Doesn't mean we've
That's the
accepted
problem. We were
both of them.
making
We have-
donations.
Right, if you're just willing to
Well, I
look
think
at
it's,
patients that we
I think it's a contract level and a service level agreement.
Call what you want now, that's semantics now.
I'd like to introduce a budget next week that includes the funding for both of these for
2 weeks, don't rush me, not next week.
next meeting, sorry. So excited to introduce the budget. Maybe introduce that with the funding for these in it, regardless of whether we meant to or not. It seems like both organizations, again, I think treating them as the same is important. And then after that, make a decision whether we're ever going to do this again, and if so, what the requirement is.
I won't be able to support that budget. This decision was made. We've had this discussion. The decision was made deliberately. It was made last year. So I
And we
think
did
this-
that because the year before that,
That's exactly right.
we
Yeah.
go through the same cycle
Yeah.
over and over again.
And that's the problem, because what is going to be fetched, and maybe the budget will pass anyway, but what will be fetched is that those of us who disagree on what is a minor point, and certainly a minor amount of money in the entire thing, will, over a policy matter, vote against that budget. Sorry, Barry.
And those of us who have a more nuanced look at it will vote for it. So
I understand.
it's
Can we have
math.
service level, proposed service
Yes.
level agreements from both of these?
Yeah.
Because I've never seen them.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen it.
I know we have them. I'll make sure you see both of them.
It's fairly
We'll
simple.
find them. I'm not sure there's more for the board to discuss on this evening.
Nope, let's move on.
Did we have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Thank you, Stan, and new Stan.
That's a high bar, new stand.
New Stan. What's his name?
They have a